yay, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I pissed out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but I don't wanna pay. I've been on furlough since May. Never go and listen to a Cockney attitude. Ooh, breaking away. Got to find a better way. I'd rather watch Auf Wiedersehen again and listen to what these old men have to say.
Hello, and welcome back to Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, and this is episode number 25. And hola, buenos dias, ¿cómo estás, Jorge?
Hola.
What is crack-a-lackin'? It is me, your genial host, Mr. Andy Sledge, and my co-host and riddled with Rona friend. Good job you're on Zoom and not in real life, infecting everybody. You absolute typhoid Mary, George Bradley, the COVID king. George, how the devil are you?
Well, I've been there, done it, got it. Although it was pretty, I had it very, very minor. I mean, I've had flu, which was 10 times worse.
Yeah.
And lasted a lot longer. It was basically 48 hours of feeling sleepy, and I didn't even have a cough. I had no cough.
Yeah, neither did I.
Didn't really have a temperature. Didn't have a temperature. But I mean, I've still got no taste. That's the annoying thing, because I love food, you know, and it's just I might as well eat cardboard, you know. It's
well, I thought when I had it, I lost my taste, and I thought, well, let's use this as an opportunity to just like eat broccoli and stuff and try and get a bit healthy. But no, I just ended up eating pizzas all the time and McDonald's and shit, whatever I could get delivered. So, but yeah, you should find that'll probably come back like the day after, like for me anyway.
Yeah.
Obviously you had me 10 days 10 days self-isolation.
10 days tomorrow, and I took a test this morning. It was negative. So.
Well, if you're like me, then you should be all right tomorrow. So or the day after. So my self-isolation was up on the midnight on the Saturday, and I woke up on the Sunday morning. I felt brand new.
Oh, great! Yeah.
So you know, I mean, that's, you know, I'm not a doctor. But let's hope that you have a similar experience, because you've had both your jabs and that. So you should be all good. So there's pretty little point then in asking what you've been doing for the last week. You've been sat in the fucking gaff, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been watching a few of these Sean Atwood podcasts that you featured on.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah, I watched one last night about the guy in prison in Jamaica. I mean, I thought that was
I've not watched that one yet. I've not watched that one yet.
Yeah, it's quite pretty good. You know, all his stuff's good. He's great. He really is good.
Yeah. It's all good. Well, I had a very exciting week, didn't I, George?
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
And I believe there might have been a little bit of a tear shed in the Bradley household this week.
Yeah.
So.
You were very lucky.
Yes, very much so. So, our viewers will be very, very, very pleased to know I went to Newcastle at the weekend, and not just to go and see my mother. I met with the beautiful and talented Vicky herself, Lesley Saint-John. And Lesley Saint-John spent we were together for, I mean, you know, there was, I mean, I say we, you know, let me preface.
It was a beautiful hotel, that as well.
Yeah. So I took my mother wanted to say hello, so I took my mother, and I was with my girlfriend and my son.
Yeah.
So my son and my girlfriend were operating cameras and.
Well, I wondered who was doing that.
Yeah. So we, as a group, were together. She was very, very kind, and she gave up a decent amount of her time. We spent almost an hour chatting for the actual interview.
Yeah.
And then we sat down and had a drink afterwards and had a chat. And what a genuine, lovely person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm so pleased. And even though you couldn't be there, George, she did give you a little shout out to send over to you. So I assume you probably sent that round all your mates.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah. It's just great. I mean, she sounds just exactly like she does in the show. Yeah. Her accent, it's her, isn't it? I mean,
exactly. So in a very short while, we will be cutting across to the our video which was filmed at the Vermont Hotel in Newcastle. So big shout out to the Vermont Hotel for allowing us to do this in their lounge. Now, so we were there before the afternoon teas, and there was a group of ladies arrived a little bit early and were quaffing a few beverages, and I think they may have got a little bit noisy towards the end of the interview. So if you can hear some background noise in the interview, you'll have to blame the drunken wenches that were sat at the other table. But we tried to do it as best we could in the place that we had available, and just she was so easy to talk to, like it didn't take a lot of prompting from me, so I asked questions and she just sort of started talking, and we got some fantastic little stories out of her. And what an absolute amazing experience for me to go and sit down with Lesley Saint-John, and it was absolutely fantastic. So that is coming up very shortly. But before we actually get into the interview and get into the episode itself, we would welcome you to give us feedback. Now, we did get some feedback on the Facebook page, and some guy said, it's a good podcast, but George should talk more, and you should cut out the 10 minutes of the banal chat in the beginning. So, yes, he is correct, George. You should talk more. But as far as cutting out the banal chat at the beginning, fuck off. We're not going to do that. Yes, but thanks for the feedback. Like I say, feedback and constructive criticism are welcome in every shape and facet, apart from slagging the prizes off. And if you want to just give us some straight up abuse, you can do so on email by emailing us on Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. That's Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. Please do follow us on social media. Instagram @Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. That's Instagram @Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Twitter @Auf Again. That's Twitter @Auf Again. Please do like and share the Facebook page, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And what we would also ask you to do is, when you're on the Facebook page, go to the community tab and click invite friends, invite all friends, and invite your friends to like the page. And we are going to be doing a giveaway competition relating to Facebook page invites at some point in the very near future. We would also urge you to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. So go onto YouTube and search Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Then click subscribe and click that bell, and that will alert you to any new episodes that are coming up. But as always, if mine and George's beautiful faces are not to your liking, but we urge you to look at Lesley Saint-John's beautiful face. We've got someone far more beautiful than me and George this week. But if you want to listen in the car, you can just do so on all good podcast platforms. Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcast, Breaker, and many more. Our new episodes are always released every Friday at 10 a.m. And as always, our theme music is composed and performed by the guitar man, Mr. Lee Dosky. So please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast is sponsored by Top Gun Tattooing of number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. Their website is topguntattoo.co.uk and their number's 01189 968 667. And we have a couple of fantastic offers available from Top Gun Tattooing. Offer number 1 is you can get a 20% discount with Zach, an award-winning tattooist at Top Gun Tattooing, by simply contacting Zach on either telephone or walking in and saying to Zach that you are a listener of the podcast, you want your 20% discount, and the code word is Hadaway and Shiteman. So if you use the code Hadaway and Shiteman, you will get 20% off any tattoo from Top Gun Tattooing. But that's not all, is it, George?
Oh, no.
We are the record-breaking, world-renowned free tattoo givers here at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. So you can get a free tattoo. Terms and conditions apply. What are those terms and conditions, I hear you say? Well, they revolve around the Neville and Lottie tattoo. So if you want to get a free Neville and Lottie tattoo, you contact us at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, and we will take you into Top Gun Tattooing, and we will pay for and film and broadcast you with your free Neville and Lottie tattoo. So George, we've only got 15 episodes left, mate. So how close are we to getting you with a Neville and Lottie tattoo?
Oh well, we'll have to wait and see. The grand finale, you know.
Exactly. Do you think we should unveil it on the last episode, George's Neville and Lottie tattoo? So, anyway, so that is our sponsors. And remember, we do have our current giveaway. The fantastic prize that is not to be slagged off in any way is provided by the amazing Graham Teasdale, and it is a genuine signed picture copy of the Magnificent Seven in Dusseldorf. So if you are interested in winning this genuine signed picture copy of the Magnificent Seven, please go onto our social media channels. You need to, on each social media channel, there on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram, there is a post for the giveaway. You need to follow that social media channel. You need to like the post. You need to tag 3 friends in the comments, and you need to share that post. So obviously in Facebook, you share it to your timeline. In Twitter, you retweet it. And in Instagram, you share it to your story and tag us in the share. And if you do that, you will be entered into the giveaway competition. Now, you can enter as many times as you like. Every time you tag 3 friends in the comments, that is classed as 1 entry. And the more you enter, the greater the chance there is that you will win. So do not hesitate. Go to the social media channels now and start tagging your friends and entering into the competition. So that's all the boring stuff out of the way. So George, without further ado, we are going to break from our beautiful faces now, and we're going to cut over to our interview at the Vermont Hotel with the beautiful Lesley Saint-John. So here we are at the Vermont Hotel in Newcastle, and our Wiedersehen Again podcast is super happy to have superstar guest on board, Vicky herself, Lesley Saint-John.
Hello. Superstar?
Absolutely. Look, I'm telling you, I mean, in essence, yes. I mean, you know, we're talking about...
In the Auf Wiedersehen Pet world.
But do you not think that, I mean, back in when this was very first released, so in 1986, this was basically the most popular TV programme on the telly. And, you know, there was only 4 channels. And so, you know, you're averaging, 15 million viewers a week. And you were the, you know, the top delectable young lady on the on the TV show. So you were like the hottest girl on the hottest show in 1986. So taking a step back from that just for a second, obviously we're having a look on your IMDb.
Are you trying to say I'm an old book now?
No, absolutely not.
No.
Well, what it is what we'll. I've got to. First of all, we've got to say that my co-host George, He's a Cockney and he lives in London, and he is absolutely devastated that he can't be here. He caught COVID at work, so he wasn't allowed to travel, and he is your #1 fan.
Oh really? I thought
He is.
I thought it was just Geordie's.
No, he loves you. He absolutely loves you.
What's his
So
name?
George.
Hi George, I'm really sorry that you can't be here, and I really hope you recover soon.
There we go. Look at that. You'll have made his day. So, looking back, you sort of jumped straight into the deep end, really, with regards to TV. So, looking on your IMDb, the first thing that was on your IMDb was Auf Wiedersehen Pet. Now, but that's your first TV job. I'm assuming that there was. Oh, is that a mistake on there? Is it? So tell us about. Give us a brief potted history about what you did previous.
To be fair, I'm not good at social media. A technophobe. As for you saying it's like this dolly bird, I'm like the old grandma now. So what's on there, I don't know. I don't keep it up to date. I don't look at it. I know I should. I'll get slapped off my agent for, but there again, I could slap his hand for not doing it. So I don't know where, but I would think the very first thing I did, I started in television when I was about 17. And a good 10 years before Auf Wiedersehen Pet, did lots of adverts, commercials, did a lot of beer adverts up here.
What, like for Newcastle Brown Ale and
Bass,
yeah.
For Folks Breweries, Best Scotch. I was like the barmaid, and all I remember is pint A or pint B. That's all I remember saying. I should really try and look up these commercials because they'll be around somewhere. I started off, to get my equity card, you had to have 40 weeks work on the stage. So I joined a band actually, and I sang in a band, and then I got put forward and I got seconded, and then I got my equity card, so then I could start and do TV work. So I started doing little bits of extra work and stuff like that. I'd been brought up on the stage because my parents were both singers and did shows and things. And then I think the very first thing I did as an extra was Operation Julie, where I was a drug addict. Loved that. Went on to do all the local things around here, which was the paper lads. I did Boys from the Black Still.
Oh right,
I can't remember actually. I think it's because a lot of people remember I did 5 years in Biker Grove with Anton Deck and Jill Halfpenny, and because this show is repeated so often, apparently I don't watch it, but everybody knows my lines far more than I do. This is the one that everyone remembers, and I mean, even I did Catherine Cookson, the girl, and nobody recognises me in it. In fact, I've even got a good friend that watched the whole film, got to the end, and it came up Nancy Boyle, Lesley Saint-John, and I had to rewind it all to see who I was, because they just didn't know it was me. I was dying of TB at the
I was going to say,
like, pretty ill.
I've never watched it. I'm sure my mother's watched it a load. So we were actually talking about it this morning. So my grandmother used to live next door to Catherine Cookson in South Shields, with Jarrow, and so my mother has read all the books and everything like that. But there was a picture online. I think there was a picture of you in that online, and I looked at the picture and I was like, that doesn't look like her at all. So yeah, the makeup department obviously did a fantastic job on you.
Well, no, it's just the way I get up on a morning.
I don't believe that for a second. And I mean, you saw, skipping ahead of our videos, you mentioned Biker Grove, and were you in it when Caspar Berry was in it, Gil Gillespie?
Yes,
because I used to go to school with him.
But just
like it's like a tiny little crossover.
there was like I forget what series I came in, but I didn't do the first series. But I know Ant and Dec were definitely there. And they'd been there probably 2 or 3 years. So I can't remember when Caspar left.
Yeah, I think he was only in it like the first. I think he was in it 89 and 90. And I think you joined in. You were 1992. Something along those lines.
You know better than me, Adam.
Well, it's only just because I've read it. I printed it off this morning, and then
I was in it for 5 years, so I wasn't in it.
Oh right, it only says 2 years here. So again,
so where did you get this from?
This is printed off from IMDb. Right. So I made the assumption that IMDb was updated by somebody who just went and did it all. So are you saying that you've got to do it yourself as an actor?
I think anybody can add to it, but it's in your own best interest to keep it up to date.
Yeah.
I'm just apathetic.
And then
but I don't know if there can't be more than one, but I'm sure I've seen something where it's got like all the series that I was in, but it was definitely 5 years.
Because you were, believe it or not, I mean, you're a bit of a sort of mystery woman on the internet, as far as the internet goes. Because googling your name, you've got no Wikipedia page, and there's very little up there. So obviously, I'm trying to do my research and come in here all prepared and seem as knowledgeable as I possibly can.
Because I don't do it. I'm not one of these. I could mention quite a few friends, but I won't. But they're just everywhere.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they're my friends and I love them, and even I get sick of seeing them and hearing about them and reading about them. And half the stories they tell, I could tell myself because I've heard them so many times, apart from the fact I've known them for 30 years and I was around at the time. And I suppose I'm quite a private person. Like there's a massive thing now about depression, and everybody's on the bandwagon, and since lockdown it's been absolutely horrendous, and suicides and things like that, and I'm so pleased that people are speaking up about it. But, and I don't think I've ever said this before out loud on something like this, but I've suffered depression for nearly 40 years. I just don't tell people, and people that do know, they'll go, but I don't know why, but you look so happy and you're so pretty and you're this and you're that, and I think it's just a persona, isn't it? It's like, you don't want to go out and go, oh look, I'm really depressed. You go, hi.
You got to.
How are you? Are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. How are
slap
you?
on a fake smile and crack on.
And then you go home and cry. So I don't know. I'm just like, I'm really a private person, and I do have a Twitter account. I do have an Instagram account, but I don't post anything.
I noticed.
I think there's a couple of things from years ago, and I do have a Facebook account, but I've got few hundred friends, and I've got 1,000, I think 998 friends requests pending.
I think one of them's mine.
Is it? Sorry. I just don't know who people are, so I just think I can't answer messages to people that I do know. And I mean, really famous people, I know they post things all the time and they don't necessarily answer people, but I feel like people think, who does she think she is? She doesn't want to. I've always worried about what people think about us. So I just think if I keep a low profile, and plus the other thing is, I don't get this about I'm this, I'm that, I don't say it. I get it. I'm just Lesley, mother of one daughter, grandmother of two granddaughters, and I don't think I'm anything special. And even when I'm with, like, say for example in here, the last time I was in here, I was with Tim Healy, Kevin Waitley, who else was there? Johnny Vegas, and we all just sit and chat. We're all friends, so we just sit and chat, and they don't see me as special, and I don't see them as special. And even when they're on the television, I'm like, oh, Kevin's on. So I don't really think people want to hear about me.
Well, you'd definitely be surprised.
Well, I have heard that a lot. I'll tell you what it was, since we did whatever it was, the 30th anniversary, I don't know if you came to that.
I didn't, unfortunately, no.
That was when I realised...
what a following you've got.
Yeah. Because everybody came on...
They're all queuing up for your table to get that picture taken.
Everybody came on and they introduced people, and then they introduced me and the place erupted. And I was like, oh, you know, it was... And I was like, wow. And people kept saying, I don't think you realise how much people like the character. I wouldn't say like me, because they don't really know me, but like the character.
But, you are correct. But, you know, as my mum just said there before, you know, some of your lines are, you know, in that show.
Yeah, but I didn't write them.
Well, you delivered them. You know, yes, you didn't write them, but, you know, it's a combination of the writing and the delivery, isn't it? Not everybody could have delivered them in the same way that you did. And my...
That's very nice of you to say. But, thank you very much.
No, you're more than welcome. But and also my personal favourite character in that series is actually Ally Fraser. And
I love Bill.
I'd love to get him on. I'd love to, but again, he's got no social media. I've got no way of contacting him or anything like
Bill's a very private person as well, and he's lovely. He's absolutely lovely. No airs and graces. And to be honest, when I did the show, although Jimmy was massive, and you know, especially Jimmy had like come through the ranks very quickly, and whereas Bill had been around for a long time and knew his craft extremely well, and he's so given and just sort of generous with, you know, his time, and he's such a good actor. I absolutely love him to bits. We've tried to get him. We do a thing called Sunday for Sammy every couple of years at the Newcastle Arena. Unfortunately, we're not doing it this February, just because of COVID, and we didn't know what was happening, which is a shame, but we'll be back in 2022. And we've tried to get Bill a few times for that, but he's always busy, he's always doing something, or again, he keeps himself to himself.
What is he? I mean, he's nearly 80, isn't he? Or is he 82 or something? I mean,
I don't know.
He's got a few years on the clock, and he's still hammering it out, isn't he?
Yeah. And I mean, even people like Kevin, like he was saying, you know, he doesn't really want to do acting anymore. He likes doing voiceovers. You know, he likes to, if you watch some programs, you'll see they're narrated. I mean, I can tell his voice straight away, but if you don't, you'll often see he narrates quite a lot of things, and I think we're just getting long in the tooth.
But yeah, like I say, so with Ally Fraser, that was always, I loved the way that he says that it's a really tiny thing, but my favourite thing about him is the way that he says the name Dennis. And he goes, Dennis, like that.
Very
and he's
good.
all,
I like the way he says Vicky.
But there's that scene where you and him are having an argument, and you're in the villa, and he's been quite derogatory to you, saying about, you know, oh, is the villa not up to scratch for you? He goes, remember, you were living on a council estate, and you said, I'd travelled before I met you, Ally Fraser. And he went, I did 2 summers in Mallorca. And then he goes, well, maybe you should ring your mate, she's probably still got the tent, and then walks off. And I mean, just the dynamic between the two of you, like I say, he's, you know...
That's the bikini scene, isn't it?
That's the famous
Oh
famous
my God,
bikini.
do you know what it is? If that was not documented, I would never, ever, ever in a million years believe I was ever that slim. Because I had such hang-ups at the time of having to wear that bikini, and there's a scene where I'm with Oz and we're in the villa. This is after the scene you've said where were having oh no, this was when Ally cuts up my clothes and things, and I think Jimmy's sitting there in his underpants. Well, not Jimmy, Oz is sitting there really in his underpants, and the police come. It's when he wins the lottery. And I remember I had to walk to the door and answer the door, and the policeman's standing at the door, and I've got this like. What was it? It was like I forget what they call them. Do they call them teddies or something? It was a two-piece anyway. It was like the French knickers and the top. And I remember walking to the door thinking, oh my God, the camera's on me bum, the camera's on me bum, the camera's on me bum. And I had such a complex. All my friends know I have like a lot of hang-ups about my body and I don't like the way I look. And when I look at that now, I think, God, I've got hang-ups now. And I thought I had hang-ups then. I would give anything to look like that now.
Well, there was definitely no need for you to have hang-ups, and like I say,
I just kept thinking, me droopy bum. I shouldn't say that because now everybody's going to go to that and rewind and watch me walk to the door.
I very much doubt there's anything to be ashamed about, and I'm pretty sure that my co-host George, that's his one of his particular favourite scenes. Is is it the green? I think it's turquoise.
So even she's laughing.
They call it the green bikini, the infamous green bikini.
And you know, I didn't know. Had I known how famous that bikini was, I kept it right up until about 10 years ago.
Oh really? Don't tell me you binned it. Oh.
I think I got rid of the top, and I had another green top, but I liked the bottoms. But the top was just two little triangles, as I'm sure you know, and I'm afraid there's no way they would fit in. They'd be more like nipple covers. So anyway, it went the distance, and somebody asked me once if I had it, and they wanted to make it into a glass, put it in a glass case in a picture frame. And I was like, you what?
Oh God, yeah.
I said it went to charity shop. And I didn't know.
So somewhere.
I didn't know.
Somewhere in the northeast, there's a young lady gone on a holiday is wearing Vicky's bikini, and she doesn't even know.
Just the top. But I think I've still got the bottoms somewhere.
Oh. Well, like I say, you probably sell that on eBay for a large amount of money, maybe. Let's actually take the step back.
You want to go topless on the beach wearing them?
Well, me personally, I definitely don't think I'd be front of the queue for the viewers to want to see it. But yes, I've got no particular hang-ups myself. But let's just take that step back. And so obviously you said you were basically born into being an actress. You know, you've got your mum and dad. So you got your bit parts, you got your equity, and so before Auf Wiedersehen Pet, were you what you would consider to be recognisable walking down the street, or were you fairly anonymous?
Anonymous.
And then you've got that part, and then I remember so the first time that you're seen is when it's on the big market and you're coming out the hairdressers and Dennis is waiting in there in the Jag, and there's the crowds, like if you actually look in the background, people have stopped and a crowd's formed because this is the beginning of season 2. The first season was hugely successful, and then to get it and obviously the people in Newcastle loved it, and so you're on the big market, you know, Tim Healy's there, people are walking past, have stopped and looked, and in the background there's all these crowds.
There was a few of us there. Kevin was there. Yeah. They might not have been in that scene, but they were there.
So you've come out, you've done your scene, and then obviously I appreciate that, you know, it's not on TV the following week. They film the whole thing, and so that after that first night, after that first scene was broadcast, how did that change your life? Did you go from I'm assuming that you went from being, like you say, fairly anonymous to like walking down the street and everyone shouting Vicky? Would that be an assumption?
I wouldn't say everyone was shouting Vicky, but yes, it did happen, and I had kids knocking on the door asking for autographs, and old friends that like really couldn't be bothered with you suddenly
All of a sudden crawl out the woodwork.
came out the woodwork and things. But I've always been, I don't want to say humble, but I've never got this that people think I'm special. Like you said, like you are like really looking forward to meeting us, and
absolutely,
and that George is gutted that he can't be here, and I think, you know, if I met Tom Cruise, I would think, oh, that's great, that, you know, somebody special. But I don't. Well, obviously, I'm not in the Tom Cruise category, but I mean, I don't. I still, all these years later, I still find it weird that people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I've met you. And I think this and I think that. And I'm like, I don't know, I think I'm nobody special.
Yeah.
And I find it weird that people think I am.
Well, self-perception is a very, very funny thing, and.
But if I was Tom Cruise and I'd done loads of movies in Hollywood and whatever, then yeah, I probably would think, you know, I'm sorry, I haven't got time for it. You know, I don't know.
Got my people to call your people, and all that, yeah.
But I give autographs, but I don't like giving autographs, but not for the reason you might think. The reason I don't like giving autographs is because I think, who am I? You know? Like if I asked for your autograph, you would think, well, yeah, okay. But you would think I'm just signing my name, why do you want that?
Yeah.
You know, it's like that.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like I say, you know, self-perception is a very, very weird thing, and there's a friend of mine went from fairly obscure. Like, I'm not going to say who it is, but there was a friend of mine who I've known for a long time.
You can tell me later.
Yeah, and he was in, you know, relative obscurity, and then he met and married someone very famous, and next thing he's on the front page of every newspaper, and he was just like, it was, you know, it was pretty brutal, and then, you know, I remember we were leaving, we were in a building somewhere, and we were going to like jump in the car, and the car was like 100 meters down the road, and like just to walk out the door to get to the car was like planning a military operation. He was like, listen, right, what we got to do, he says, when we get out the door, you don't stop for anything.
No, it's
he
not
says,
like
you
that
just
for
keep
me.
going. And it was
I'm
just
not that famous.
And you know, he's basically back in relative obscurity now, but you know, there was a period of his life there was a few years of his life when he was very, very sought after for pictures in the press and because of who he was, and it just and he had a bit of a similar thing, you know. He was like, you know, yesterday I was nobody, and today all of a sudden I've got photographers chasing us down the street just because of who I went out with yesterday.
Well, no, I don't have photographers chasing us down the street.
But you must have done in 1986.
I did have a lot of press, as in the newspapers, but had it happened now, with the OK magazine, the Hello magazine, the New magazine, the Closer magazine, the hundreds of magazines that are going, the social media, then I think I probably would be a lot more famous, a lot more people would know who I was. I probably might have gone down a slightly different path. I was going to move to London, but at the time I had split up from my husband, and I'd had my daughter, and I was thinking, how do I do this? Like, if I go to London, I haven't got my parents to look after my daughter, so I can't even go for an audition. But it was that north-south divide of, like, there was no Zoom calls then. So you could have an audition in London, it would cost you 150 quid
on the train
to get the train, to get to wherever you were going, come back again, maybe you had to stay over. Very few paid expenses depending on who and what and how much they wanted you. I mean, if they asked for you, obviously they paid.
Yeah.
And then if you didn't get the job, you were that much money down. So I thought it would be better to live down there. And I often wonder if there'd been all these magazines, because now everybody and his dog is, you know, oh, so-and-so received fallen out of a nightclub, and such has had their hair cut, and oh, so-and-so said they couldn't be pregnant at this age, and they're all like a load of crap stories that half of them are made up. But their face is out there, their face is out there, their face is out there. And also, a lot of people deliberately put themselves out there, and I don't.
Yeah.
I've never networked, I've never pushed myself. I've been with people that have been doing projects, and I would love to have been in them, but I would never have said, which I know some of my friends have said, here's a job.
Yeah.
You know, people have rang up people and said, you know, can you not get me in this and can you not get me in that? And I think, God, are you not in enough? You know, and I just can't do it. I think I would have done a lot more had I been that pushy person. And if you're waiting at home, like I do, waiting for Steven Spielberg to knock on the door, it isn't going to happen. It isn't going to happen. But sometimes I wish I was more pushy. And
sounds like you need a new agent.
it's not so much that, it's just, again, I don't want to say too much about people because they are my friends and I really like them, but you know don't you know who I am?
Oh.
You know, and I mean, I've got some people that I think, some friends, acquaintances, and I think, of course I know who you are, and you're a dick. Do you know what I mean? And like, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I sent you that message on Instagram, and it was, I don't know.
You're very lucky I found that.
And well,
because I thought, what's this thing on this arrow in the top?
Yeah.
In the top of my
the
phone?
requests.
What is it?
Yeah. And then and you know, from the first reply, you were just, you know, so down to earth and so, you know welcoming and accommodating, and you were like, yeah, no problem.
I can't remember what I said now.
And yeah, no, I just said, look, you know, I'd love to be able to speak to you about the show, and you went, yeah, of course. And then, you know, we swapped a few messages.
I'm really here because I don't like doing Zoom.
Well, that was it. I said, oh, we'll do it on Zoom. And you went, oh, I don't know how to use it. And I went, well, I'll come to Newcastle.
I do. And I have done self-tapes and auditions and whatever. But I just, it's just so false because I think as a presenter, you talk to the camera, you talk to the people at home, you're talking to whoever. I don't do that. When you're an actress, you avoid the camera.
Yeah.
You always avoid the camera. You never want to look in the lens unless the script specifically says at the end, you know, you do a
break the fourth wall kind of thing. Yeah.
So, and with Zoom, you're like looking back at yourself as well.
Yeah.
And
then
it takes us ages to set it up, and I don't.
Like when I'm on them Zoom calls, like my eyes automatically get drawn to the picture of myself, and I'm like, what am I looking like?
Well, I'm
it
going,
drives me
do
insane.
I look at the picture in the corner, or do I just look at the middle of the screen, or do I look where the lens is? And
we record most of the podcasts on Zoom, so what I've done now is I've got like a bit of cardboard that I drape over the screen to stop myself looking at myself, because otherwise I'd be doing it like that, looking at the corner of the screen. It's absolutely
well, that was it. That's what I was saying. Like, where do I look? And I was told, well, look wherever you want. And I thought, well, you know, I'm going to end up just looking cross-eyed.
So you were in 10 episodes out of the 13 from season 2. Is there any particular one you can sort of still remember now about which was maybe your favourite, or what did you enjoy most? I mean, you know, there was some of it was filmed, a lot of it was filmed in Nottingham. There was obviously the locations in Newcastle, and then obviously, you know, Marbella. And I actually lived in Marbella myself for about 5 years.
Did you?
Yeah, I was.
You weren't selling timeshare, were you?
Well, real estate. It wasn't timeshare, no. But
I don't know. You just were like a timeshare salesman.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If the money was there, I probably would have done it. But yeah, it was.
Well, back in the day,
I was. Fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, timeshare had sort of died a death by the time I was out there. You know, back probably in the 80s when you were out there working, that was probably the peak timeshare times.
Yeah.
So you were probably getting bothered by timeshare touts all the time when you were.
I didn't.
But,
Because I
Do you
didn't
remember
really go anywhere.
how long? Do you remember how long you were in Marbella for?
About 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I think. The thing
And
is,
have you ever been back? Have you been back since at all? And did you sort of drive along? Wow, we filmed there and we did that.
no,
and...
because I'd been before.
All right.
And I've been afterwards.
Yeah.
My parents had a timeshare actually up in Mihas.
All right.
And I'd stayed in their place with them, but we'd just go to like, is it Orange Square?
Yeah, the Orange Square Marbella, yeah.
We didn't really go out. We just stayed in the hotel, and I had my daughter
All right.
there. I had a nanny, and I had my daughter there. I've got a great photograph of her playing outside of the villa in what she thought was a sandpit, but there's
the
like a
building site.
cement mixer right behind her. You know, and she used to just sit with her book and spade, and I didn't really take her very often.
Yeah.
But she was quite small. In a couple of days she was a bit like, I don't want you to go.
Yeah.
So I would just take her with me.
Because there's that, you mentioned it before about the status quo quote, and that's when you're sitting with Kenny Ames and you're on the front at Port of Venus,
Yeah.
and the camera angle is like from inside the restaurant looking out, and you can see like the corner of the port with the lighthouse and everything
It's
like
amazing,
that.
isn't
And
it?
it's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, like that's, you know, and then, you know, these days it's, you know, very much all Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all of that.
Oh, it always has been.
And
I'm sure it still is.
and yeah, and I remember I was walking down there with my granny once, and I looked up and Dolph Lundgren was walking towards me, and I was like, Dolph Lundgren, martial arts.
Really?
I'm a big fan of the martial arts and all that. And,
Did you speak to him?
Well, I didn't know. He was with his kids and all that, and I was with my granny, and it was like, you know, and it just, you know, it didn't really. There wasn't like a convenient point, but there's the bit where Brent, when everyone's walking before they go onto Kenny Ames's boat, and they're walking along, and Brenda's talking, and she goes, that's where we saw Sean Connery yesterday," and yeah, you know, that's what Marbella's like, and like I say, that's a beautiful angle of, you know, showing what it's all about, but yeah, like you say, you've got that famous line, and Kenny Ames says, "We don't want to upset the status quo," and you're like, do they live here as well? I mean, like, again, you know, as
Well,
you
that's
said before.
Dick Clemency in the funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I know, but again, you know, they did write it, but you know, you delivered it.
we never really went there at all. I mean, Alan McEwen took us out, the main cast, out for a meal one night there. Can't remember what it was called. It was further up the other end.
Yeah.
Is it? Is there a Sinatra's?
Sinatra's is on the corner, yeah, that's a very famous bar.
It might have been there. I've got photographs of it actually. I should have brought them. And he treated us all to a meal that night. We all went out, just like thank you, I suppose. And I think apart from when we did the Hazel and Barry's wedding,
Yeah.
I don't think I was down there at all.
All right.
Because I was down to have a look in a few shops, but I was either working, or if I wasn't working and up at the villa, I would just be at the hotel with my daughter.
Yeah.
So never really did anything or went anywhere, and we had early starts, and the day I was on the boat I was so ill.
Oh,
I had a
really?
problem with me in her ear,
Oh, God.
and I literally got off the boat and I looked so drunk. I couldn't walk, and I got to the hotel, and luckily one of the makeup artists was walking towards us, and I said, I don't feel well, and I remember just putting my back against the wall and just sliding down the wall, and I just had to go straight to bed, and just everything was like never like boats since.
Oh, God, yeah. I've had a couple of bits about seasickness, and it's you just feel like you're dying, don't you? It's just...
Well, we got up we were on that boat from 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was dark when we came back.
Oh, God.
And I mean, this was in August,
So it's like 40 degrees.
so it was a long day.
Yeah.
from 6 o'clock in the morning to being dark, it must have been about 9-10 o'clock at night.
So that sounds like your least favourite part of it.
So, but definitely, in answer to your question, I loved all of it, but yes, the more bear bits have to be when you know, I've never had an opportunity like that since. So yeah, that would be. I mean, it was a bit weird that like all the exteriors were in Marbella, but then the interiors were back in Nottingham, and they were back in Nottingham like 3 months later.
So, how close were you to Gary Holden? Did you know him very well?
I did know him, but this is hard to say when this is for Auf Wiedersehen Pet fans, but we used to go for a drink in the hotel on a night. But a lot of them used to drink to excess, and obviously we know how detrimental, you know, drinking drugs could be. Luckily, I've never. I mean, I do drink, and I do like a drink. But not like doubles, trebles one afternoon. You know, I like a couple of glasses of prosecco or champagne or whatever, and that's probably me. So when he was sober, he was really nice.
All right.
And he could have a really good chat, and he was quite funny. But then he could get. He had a lovely girlfriend at the time that he used to take everywhere. She was always in the hotel. And it was nice to have a chat with everybody, because we'd all sit like this, you know, there'd be like a few of us. But when people had a lot to drink, I used to leave.
Yeah.
But when we did the bit, which is supposed to be Ally Fraser's house in Darras Hall, which was actually filmed in a house in Nottingham, and I spent quite a bit of time with Gary that night.
Because you had that scene outside in the car when you were talking about it.
But I wish I'd brought some photographs now, but I've got this photograph of me and him sitting on the sofa, and I think he's grabbing a hold of us or something, and I'm just laughing. And it's a great photograph of the two of us. But I didn't really have many scenes with him. So again, in answer to your question, no, I didn't really know him very well. And he could be a pain, but then he could be really nice. And it was funny because at his funeral, when somebody got up to speak, and they said that. They said he wasn't like, you know, you can get up at a funeral, but he was so lovely.
He was the nicest man in the world.
Yeah. And he was, but he wasn't as well.
Yeah.
You know, there was two sides to him, but I think sometimes when drinking drugs are involved, you're going to get that.
But the reason I asked that is it sort of just jumped in my head when you mentioned about the outside in Marbella and the inside in England, because there's the scene in the episode we're going to be doing next week where you and him are talking at the bar, and Bomber comes in and picks him up and carries him out. But that's not actually him; it's a stand-in, isn't it? So, and you can hear that like they've dubbed his voice over the top, because it's not relevant what he says. He goes, "Hey, what am I supposed to do then?" And Bomber carries him out, and it's obviously clearly just a line that they've recycled from previous.
It was all shot out of sync, so you didn't do like episode 1, episode 2. Because it was, I keep hearing somebody saying Lesley. Can you hear them?
I think it's them.
There's obviously a Lesley over there. It's quite distracting. Can you shut up? Don't you know who I am? There's only one Lesley here. Sorry, what was I saying?
Yeah, you said it wasn't shot in order. It was all shot out of sync.
It's not shot in sync. And so in one way, that was good, because we could play about with bits, because after, you know, he had passed away, but we still had done scenes with him, that was slotted in a later episode. But that scene actually where he's lifted up was actually in a nightclub in Nottingham.
All right.
And that was the wrap. That was the last day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In a casino.
Yeah.
There was a casino scene
That's
in
right.
that.
Yeah.
And that was the day we wrapped. So it was quite a sad day
Oh God. Yeah. But
all around. Yeah. But the worst bit for me with Gary was we said that the scene you're on about where I'm outside in the car with Wayne and Vicky's about to pull off in the Jag, and she says she's going to Annabelle's club.
But they changed it to Cannibals, don't they?
Because Annabelle's was a club in Sunderland. And see, I told you, you know all this stuff. But the thing is, people like ask the history of things. The history doesn't change. So obviously the subjects have come up before, and people know the answers. But I had to.
I've actually been to Annabelle's in Sunderland once.
Yeah.
I didn't venture over that. I didn't venture into Weir Side very often as a kid.
I went once, yeah. I don't remember it, but I remember I went once before this. So anyway, they had to do with Cannibals. Why they wouldn't want Annabelle's in it, I don't know, because I think it would have been good for
maybe
them.
some
But anyway,
legal perspective or something like
oh,
that. I
look at
don't
me,
know.
flashing.
You haven't got that purple bikini on it, no.
It was green.
Oh, green, sorry. Turquoise, I think it was. That's what I thought it was turquoise.
Teal.
Teal.
Maybe
Oh, well, there you go.
Teal.
So yeah, so obviously you said that, you know, you had that, you know, the relationship with Gary was a little bit whatever. So out of all of the other members of the cast, then.
Oh, sorry, that's what I was going to say.
Oh.
Well, the bit about Cannibals.
All right.
I had to go into a booth and redo the
the
voiceover
voice.
of, you know, they just said, we just want you to say a line again, but we want you to drop Cannibals in, and then we'll drop that in where you said Annabelle's. But what they didn't tell me was through the cans they were going to play Gary's line, his feed,
Right.
and I just didn't say anything because I got a shock,
Yeah.
because I just wasn't expecting it. And I'm just in this recording booth with the headphones, and then all of a sudden I just hear Gary talking, and I just went, sorry, sorry I didn't say my line, but
Took you back for a second.
I just didn't know they were going to do that. It stands to reason now, because that's obviously a feed. But yeah, it was very sad.
Yeah.
It was very sad.
So who was, out of all of the other, I mean, you mentioned obviously you had a great time with Bill, and you had some good scenes with Jimmy towards the end when, you know, when he, like you say, when he was sitting down in his pants and you were a bit paranoid about the view from the back. So out of all of the people that you had scenes with and all of the other cast members, who was probably your best mate out of the lot?
Probably Melanie Hill.
Yeah.
And the wardrobe lady, because our kids were the same age.
All right.
And the kids used to play. No, I was quite friendly with Tim Healy.
Yeah.
And Tim and Kevin. But I also got on really well. Although I don't think Vicky had many scenes with Bomber. But he was lovely. And we used to have like lunch together on the bus, and you know, you would have like when you were on location, you would always tend to have lunch on a converted bus or whatever. But yeah, we're quite opposites, but we really got on well. He was really, really nice person. And again, a bit like Bill, he was very helpful, giving, friendly. I think there was only a few scenes at the bar really that Vicky ever had with Bomber.
Yeah.
but Pat was really nice. And I remember Tim once when we were filming in London, and of course a lot of them lived in London, and I didn't, so I'd be in a hotel. And I remember one day, after we finished rehearsing, we finished at 2 o'clock, and it was like, now what am I going to do? And Bill took us into Covent Garden and had a wander around there. That was great. And one day Tim had said, Tim Healy, he'd said, you know, you can come back to mine for a coffee. So we did that, and we had a good chat. So we got quite pally. I think the fact that we were Geordies, and plus I knew Tim before.
All right.
Before I actually got the part. Not very well, but I did know him. I knew Denise Welsh. I knew Denise very well because we used to always go up for the same parts. She went up for Vicky, I went up for Coronation Street. So we would often meet and see each other. I mean, I've known Denise longer than I've known Tim. I must have known Denise easy 40 years. Because your paths collide.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, so I don't know that I had a favourite, and I don't know that I knocked around with anybody. Because again, like I say, when I got home, I had my daughter and I would spend time with her. But we did things as groups, as a group.
All right.
So we had like table tennis tournament, and I think it was Kevin's daughter's birthday, so we had a birthday party one night, and so all the cast, the crew, catering, makeup, wardrobe, sound, chippies, everybody, you know, all the Sparkies would all like get together, and the hundreds of us, you know, and do stuff together. And apart from that, I'd probably be in it was a part hotel, so you had your kitchen and whatever, and a lot of time just being watching telly or just having a quiet time.
Well, unfortunately, Lesley, it looks like the place that we are is about to be populated with people with their afternoon tea. So I could sit and speak to you all day. It's been an absolute pleasure. But unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap this up now because the noise level is getting a bit high.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Can't quite hear.
But listen, I just, you know, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say a massive, massive thanks.
Thank you.
You've been absolutely legendary to go out of your way and spend some time with us, and I'm sure that the fans of the podcast are going to absolutely enjoy it.
And I'm going to enjoy this Rioja.
Yeah, bottle of white Rioja, and there for you as well.
Oh, thank you. How lovely. Oh,
so listen,
gorgeous.
Everybody, this is Lesley Saint-John, and she's been the Stevie Nicks haircut. So Lesley, thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
And we are back, and that was absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So I just want to say a huge, once again, a massive, massive, massive heartfelt thanks to Lesley Saint-John. And hopefully you will notice, I think she did mention it at the end there, but what I did is to say a massive thank you. I bought her a bunch of flowers and a bottle of white Rioja.
Yeah, nice touch. Yeah, very good.
So yes, so one of the favourite lines is when she's in that restaurant with Ali and Kenny Ames, and she goes, I didn't know they did white Rioja. So I went to the supermarket and I bought her a bottle of white Rioja, Rioja. We all know it's Rioja, yes, before anyone emails in and goes, it's Rioja. Yes, we know it's Rioja, but yes, so we bought the beautiful Lesley Saint-John a fantastic bottle of white Rioja and a bunch of flowers, and she was made up with that. I mean, like I say, I'm going to say it again, what a genuinely fantastic person she was. And yes, you know, she gave up a lot of her time, and even after the interview finished, we sat and we talked, and yeah, just a lovely person.
Yeah.
So yes, cannot say enough good things about Lesley Saint-John. And she was talking that I think it's next year they're going to start hosting the Sunday for Sammy once again.
Yeah.
So she did say that next year, if we go up for the Sunday for Sammy, that we should drop her a message, and she will come and see us again. So yes, very much looking forward to that. So without further ado, George, let us move on to this episode. So this is Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast episode 25, and it relates to Series 2, episode 12, For Better or Worse. So this is the penultimate episode of Series 2, and things are starting to boil up to the surface.
There's plenty going on.
There is plenty going on. So we have some, we've got a couple of fantastic cameos, which we will discuss as and when they appear. And obviously the locations are in Spain, in Marbella. And the episode was first broadcast on the 9th of May, 1986. So the first scene is a very, very pleasant scene of Bomber coming out of the toilet tent. Now, I know that, it's not, I don't know whose idea it was. I mean, they've got the villa there.
That's it, yeah.
With the, they've got the villa there, and obviously I'm sure there's plenty toilets in the villa, but obviously I'm assuming that they've got muddy shoes and what have you, but, that toilet tent in 35, 40 degree weather must be definitely kicking up a stink. And you can
the flies, God.
Yeah, and you could probably imagine that Bomber drops some big old stinking load.
He can unload like an elephant, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. So Bomber is coming out of the toilet tent, and like you said, George, the flies are buzzing around, and they would definitely be giving you some grief inside the confines of that little tent. And so Bomber's walking out, and Oz is walking towards it, and Bomber says, I'd give it 5 if I were you. And Oz quite rightly says, what? He says, I'd rather use the bushes than risk going in there, mate. And Bomber has a little bit of a laugh to himself. He's like, So Neville and Moxie are tiling the pool, and Neville's talking about the toilet. He says, the bloke I feel sorry for is the poor sod that's got to clean it out. Moxie says, he says, still, it's all right for some though, isn't it, Nev? Some of us are staying in the villa. And Barry, then one of his interesting facts, he says that Pong could well have could well cause great aggression and disharmony amongst us, And Dennis says, look, Barry, man, he says, we've worked in much worse conditions than this before. We're not going to fall out over a portaloo. And I mean, a portaloo would be actually luxury compared to the bog tent, basically. Because I'm pretty sure there's just a bucket in that tent. A bucket with a bit of a wooden rim in that tent. A portaloo's like a porta cabin, isn't it?
I mean, I actually have a friend who was he went to Goa, and he was using a similar sort of toilet, and the wooden slats it was sort of built on collapsed, and he fell into the the pit, and he had to come out covered, and a few of the locals got a hose, and he just stood there, and everyone watching him, and they were hosing him down.
That's horrific. I mean, the worst experience I've had was when I was in Bangkok, that time that me and you were in Thailand. And I went on a visa run to Cambodia, and obviously, you get the dodgy belly when you're in Thailand. And I got to the border, and I was on the Thai Cambodian border in the middle of nowhere. And it was like, you gotta go. And so I jumped out this minibus, and I'm like, right, where's the toilet? And they've gone there, and I've opened the door, and there's just one of them holes in the ground. And it was like, but you gotta go. Luckily, I had the foresight. I took a packet of baby wipes with me. You know what I mean?
Good.
That was the only saving grace of the entire experience. But yeah, once you've had to once you've had to squat over a hole in the ground on the Cambodian border, any toilet in England is even the toilet in the tent would be luxury compared to the hole in the ground in Cambodia. So anyway, and then Wayne says, he goes, I like to go last thing at night, I do. And then he sings a song. Do you know what song he's singing, George?
I can't remember. No, what was it?
No, well, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Is Barry says no. He says it's serious. It's pheromones. Obviously, Barry mispronounces the word pheromone. Pheromones. And then Wayne says no. He says no. It weren't it with the Kinks. So he was obviously singing a song for the Kinks. Again, my knowledge of the Kinks is very, very limited to absolutely zero. And then Moxie, misunderstanding, he goes, who the heck are the pheromones? And Barry says, not a lot of people know about pheromones. I only found out about them when I read this article in a magazine in the Chiropodist. And Dennis makes a pun. He says, footnote, was it? And Barry says, look, if you don't want to hear, look, it's no skin off. He goes, no sweat off my arse. A bit crude for Barry. He says, just go back to your normal moronic topics of conversation, sex, relegation, and the death by. And then again, he says something I didn't understand. I rewinded it and rewound it, and I couldn't hear exactly what he said. But Oz says, no, Barry, however, dazzle were. Por favor. And Barry says, pheromones may well be a contributing factor to football hooliganism. He says, you see, they're invisible entities which fly off into the atmosphere when you take a pee, and they stimulate aggressive tendencies. He says, now at half-time, when everyone pees at once, massive numbers of pheromones are set free. Right. And apparently this is why 67% of violence takes place in the second half. Nothing to do with the fact that everyone's got absolutely bladdered and we drink alcohol during the break. Anyway, he says, come up, and Neville just goes, he comes up with something every day. And I was like, no, he says, I can go along with that. He says, I was at Villa Park one year and someone pissed in my pocket. I was furious. Anyway, so Vicky pulls up in a Volkswagen Golf Cabriolet.
Yeah, GTI looks like.
Yeah, and so she walks around the corner in a very delectable looking dress, and Wayne immediately notices. But as Wayne is noticing Vicky, Bomber is noticing Wayne.
Yeah. And
Bomber positions himself in Wayne's view and says, off limits, boyo. And Wayne says, I'm not sure, Bomb. I mean, at Ally's party, in Geordieland, I definitely got a flash off that one. And he says, you mess around with her and bollocks it up for the rest of us, you'll have more than a flash off me, Wayne. And Wayne says, don't sermonize me, Bomb. You're not past a bit of lechery yourself. I saw you the other night down the casino. 2 young travel agents from Preston, eh? And he has a laugh. And Wayne thinks it's funny. And Bomber's deadly serious. He says, nothing I did with them is going to come back on a slot. And he says, off limits. And so he has laid down the law for Wayne. And anyway, Vicky comes up and she says, morning, lads. And Moxie says hello, and Neville says how do, and Dennis stops what he's doing. He says, right, I'll not be long. So Vicky's having a look and she says, mind, this place is coming along, you'll be finished soon. And then Oz, he's picking up big rocks and throwing them. He says, we didn't hang about us lot, And then we see the first little glimmer of interest. Yeah. And so Vicky starts speaking to us. She goes, what are you going to do when the job's finished, Oz? And he says, me? I don't know. I suppose I'll have to go back and face the grim reality of Margaret Thatcher's Britain. And he's drinking a beer. And he says, unless your Ally coughs up a finishing bonus, then I can postpone it for a week. And again, she probes for more information. She's like, take off somewhere, He says, well, me and Barry had planned to have a slow tovey back through France, but knew with his, fiancée, we've had to give La France the big E, so to speak. So I'll be on my own as usual. And Barry pipes up. He says, I'm very sorry my personal affairs have intruded on your plans, Oz. And he says, not my plans, pal. You were the one that wanted to go and see the shite houses of the Loire. And he goes, chateaus, Oz. And Vicky says, I've always fancied Saint-Tropez myself. I think there's more nightlife. And I mean, well, it's more sophisticated than this, like, isn't it? And Moxie says, oh, aye, yeah, definitely. Give me Saint-Tropez any time. So Dennis has got dressed and he comes out the villa. And he says, right, Vicky, we're ready. And he says, right. And she goes, well, we'll go in my car as I've got the top down. And Christine says, well, that dress is very nice and very cool. And again, Christine commenting on what Vicky is wearing. She makes a habit of, like, I'm sure it's like, you know, it's snipey. It's like typical female to female, snipey little backhanded bitchy compliments. She's like, well, that dress is nice and cool. And basically it's because it's see-through. You can see her knickers.
Yeah.
And she goes, yes, sir. She goes, well, I'll take you to this boutique after. And Dennis makes it, and he says, well, we better take two motors then. Says, right, lads, see you in a bit, stick in. And Wayne says, where are they off to? And he says, they've gone to pick up some tiles. Moxie says, they've gone to pick up some tiles. And then the baby cries. So Neville says, excuse me, lads, I won't be a minute. And Oz says, I'll say one thing for War Marjorie. She never wanted to be that close to me work. He says, here, Barry, why didn't you get Hazel up here on the job with you? Then you could sort out your private life and cut cable at the same time. So Oz is having a bit of a jibe at Neville there, I think. And Barry says, I like my private life to remain private. Thank you very much. And Wayne says, we await developments with bated breath. So we cut to the inside of the villa. And Neville is speaking to Brenda, and he's obviously inquiring about the baby, and he says, "Is she okay?" Yeah. And she goes, That's that. You know what? That is such a Geordie expression. That like like that was like you used to hear my mother on the phone to her mates when we were kids, and she'd be like, like have a full blown conversation like that. And she goes, I've quietened her down, poor pet. And Neville says, well, look, if her temperature's not down by tomorrow, we've got to get the doctor in. And then then this is the most ironic thing and strange thing. So Brenda, who is, you know, a nurse in the hospital, and her partner, her badminton partner was Dr. Ally, like was Ally whatever, some Egyptian doctor. She goes, I don't know, Neville. I hate the thought of foreign doctors. I mean, at least she goes, at least when we're at home, we can go around the corner and see Dr. Amrit Raj. She doesn't like foreign doctors, but Dr. Amrit Raj in Newcastle is okay. And he says, well, I think it's a combination of just them mosquito bites and too much sun on the beach yesterday. And says, you're probably right. He goes, listen, I've got to get back to the lads. You just stopping here today. She goes, well, what else? She goes, well, I haven't got. She goes, well, I've got to, haven't I? She says, well, you could. She goes, well, I could keep an eye on her if you want, and you could go down the port. She goes, oh, Neville Pet, it wouldn't look right. You've got your job to do. And he says, it's ironical. I don't even think it's a real word. Ironical, isn't it? Here's us. We've got a luxury villa, and I'm outside laying bricks, and you're stuck indoors watching Spanish telly. So we cut to the tile shop, and Vicky, and this is the scene where Lesley Saint-John said was her favourite part, going out to the tile shop. And so Vicky, Christine and Dennis are looking at tiles, and Vicky says, which one do you think, Chris? And she goes, well, it's your villa after all, Vicky. And again, quite condescending the way that she says it. And Vicky says, oh, I know, but you've got a flair for this sort of thing, and that's what I wanted you to. That's why I wanted you to come. And the salesman, he says, es doble más caro que este. As that one costs twice as much as the other. And for some reason, Christine is all of a sudden fluent in Spanish. He says, what's he saying? And she says, that one's twice as expensive as that one. And Dennis says, there's plenty more to choose from, you know. And she says, no, my mind's made up. It's between these two. And Christine says, well, if it was up to me, I'd go for this one, the more traditional design, but that is the expensive one. And Vicky says, well, I'm not bothered about that. I mean, it's Ally's money. And Dennis says, well, that's the one then, is it? She goes, I am adamant I will have that one. And Dennis says, right, I'll do the business, okay? And he goes inside with the tile shop man. And then Vicky says, I wonder if I should tile the barbecue area. What do you think? And she goes, I don't know, Vicky. I really don't know. But I'm sure the villa is going to be absolutely exquisite once it's finished. Again, a bit condescending and a bit sarcastic. And so Vicky's, you know, you can see she's a bit down and she's like, And she goes, you don't sound very enthusiastic. And she goes, oh, it'll be all right if it was just for the odd week. She goes, what do you mean? She goes, oh, and then she breaks and she turns around and she's like, oh, Chris, I've got nobody to confide in. That's why I'm pleased you're here. I mean, Ally never tells me anything, but even I can put two and two together. He's been really touchy recently, and there's been all these late night phone calls, and now his solicitor's turned up, and you can bet Hallwood's not down here for a tan. She says, what are you saying, Vicky? And she says, I'm saying we might be down here for good. And I mean, like, even if Ally Fraser is got to live in exile, it doesn't mean she can't go back. You know what I mean? And Christine says, oh, well, if it does come to that, there are worse places to live. And she says, I know, it's got everything. I mean, the climate in the Mediterranean, and we'll get all the English television flown over on video. But Chris, and this is a fantastic line in the way it's delivered. She goes, Chris, I'd die if I thought I was never going to see Newcastle again. Again, you know, does have the ability to fly back herself. She's not being charged with any crimes. So we go back. We cut back to the pool, and they've finished for the day. And Dennis says, "Right, lads, let's knock it on the head." And they're discussing their evening. And Wayne says, "Right, who's by the casino tonight then, eh?" And Bomber's on. A lot of female tourists down the casino. And Moxie's like, yeah, I'm on. My look's got to change sometime. And Wayne says, are you coming, Barry? Or is it dinner for deux with you and Hazel? He says, it is, as a matter of fact. I managed to book a table at that place in the port. You know, the one that's in all the guides. You know where all the rich people off the yachts go. And Oz says, well, if that doesn't do it, now will. And then Barry, you know, basically they're walking down the thing, and he pulls him aside. He's like, Oz. He goes, yeah. And he says, Oz. He goes, look, I'm sorry about the French trip, mate. He says, that's all right, forget about it. Actually, I'm thinking of going to Ibiza. And he says, well, I've got a couple of mates doing there, and they claim it's paradise. He says, you're either pissed out your brains or stoned out your skull for 24 hours, apparently. And the totty, they reckon that there's that much floating about on the beach that you can't out your mind with choice. So that sounds just like the sort of place for a bit of recuperation after this lot. So Oz definitely likes the sound of Ibiza. And Barry says, obviously, Hazel coming over has put a whole new complexion on our relationship. Like, wonderful. I didn't ask her, I didn't beg her or nothing. She came to me. And he says, paying her own fare? And he says, yeah. He says, that's bound to tell you something, that is, you know. And Oz says, tells me she's got more dough than trade. So Oz puts the dampener, the negative slant on it straight away. And he says, don't put the mockers on it, Oz. He says, you know how much she means to me. Like, if it wasn't for Hazel Redfern, none of us lot would have got back together, would we? We wouldn't be here. And he says, no, true. And he goes, and then Oz is drinking the bottle, and he goes, here, and he hands the bottle to Barry. And I mean, like, there must just
for one sip.
Yeah, there must just be the dregs. And Barry goes, cheers, and he takes a sip, and then Oz just grabs it straight back. Proper, not very generous at all. And then, and he says, it seems eons ago, doesn't it, when we were all reunited to renovate my love nest. And he says, he says, did a sound job of that plumbing, didn't we? And he says, yeah. He says, I'll tell you, your labour won't be in vain, mate. Just feel we're so much more optimistic. I'm just feel so much more optimistic about our future now. And he says, mind, I still say we should have put a bigger boiler in, like. Anyway, so we cut to the inside of the villa, and Brenda's laying the table, and Christine enters. And she says, "Hi, Brenda." Hi. And says, "How's Debbie?" And says, "All right, there's rain now." And is she? "Oh, good." Says she's playing with Neville and Dennis is in the shower. And Christine says, "If you like, I'll look after her tomorrow. You can have a day out with Hazel. I've just seen her down the port and she's at a bit of a loose end." And she says, "I couldn't ask you, Pet." And she says, "No, really, I enjoyed. She's a lovely little girl and I'm sure she'd be all right with me. In any case, it'll give me a break from Vicky." And again, you know, we see she's not, I don't think Vicky's, we can obviously see that Vicky isn't Christine's favourite person. And she goes, "I thought you two got on." She goes, "Oh, we do. It's a bit depressing going around all these expensive boutiques helping her choose the latest in Italian swimwear." She goes, "God, you wouldn't believe the prices." And she goes, she goes, she wants for nothing. And she goes, "Maybe," she goes, "she's terribly generous. I'll say that for her. Look, she bought us one of these each," right?
Oh, aren't they disgusting? Those two.
Yeah, but she goes, "She's terribly generous." That's like a you know, a €10, €7 Marbella shirt.
Oh, it's awful.
Get in one of the cheap tatty tourist shops on the front in Marbella. You know, I mean, like, I would hardly consider it to
one
be
of the Africans selling them on the beach.
Yeah, the looky men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would hardly consider it to be terribly generous. And anyway, Brenda's like, "Ooh, hey, I like that." And then Christine says, "Something smells good in there." She goes, I hope so. I'm trying me hand." And again, I didn't understand what she said. She goes, "I'm trying me hand at Zars Whaler." You know, like some kind of cooking, or I don't know, I've never heard of it. She goes, "Wow, look at this." She goes, "They must be," she goes, "Look at this lot, they must be Ally's best." She goes, "Yes, well, I thought we'd show the lads that we can live as elegantly as anyone around here. See if you can find some candles, Christine." So we cut to the casino.
Yeah.
And our first interesting cameo.
All right.
The croupier.
Oh.
Now, to be honest, I just had a look and I thought, he's a croupier. But the croupier is played by a man called Ray Marioni.
Right.
And he has 104 credits on IMDb. And his career spanned from 1958 to 2000. But, interesting fact.
Yeah.
Ray Marioni must be the go-to croupier for every TV program that has ever been made.
He can operate a roulette wheel.
Ever.
Yeah.
Right. So out of the 104 credits, yeah, Ray Marioni has been a croupier 17 times. So basically 15% of his jobs have been as croupier.
Maybe that's what he trained as originally.
But that's what I was actually trying to find, but there was no information. So 104 credits, including some show called Compact, croupier, some show called Londoners, croupier, that Riviera Touch, croupier, Mickey Dunn, croupier. He was on Doctor Who, The Saint, Budgie as a croupier, The Man with a Golden Gun, some program called Thriller as a croupier, some program called The Expert as a croupier. He was in Mind Your Language. He was in a program called Lily as a croupier. He was in The Professionals. He was in Duty Free as a croupier. He was in Grange Hill. He was in a program called The Bretts as a croupier. He was in a program called The Revenue Men as a croupier. He was in something called Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush as a croupier. He was in The File of the Golden Goose as a croupier. Fraud Squad, croupier. Between the Stars, Between the Wars, croupier. The Palisades, croupier. Top Secret Life of Edgar Briggs, croupier. So, obviously he hasn't worked for the last 21 years, but if at some point between 1958 and the year 2000 you needed a croupier, Ray Marioni was the fucking man to play that. So big shout out to the king of the croupiers, Ray Marioni. So the king of the croupiers, they're all playing roulette. He says, no more bets, no más puestas. And Barry comes up and he says, yes. He goes, wait a minute, Barry. And he goes, 27 red, rojo. And he says, do you know that restaurant I was telling you about? The one in the port, the one that was so difficult to get into? He says, well, we can't get into it. So Hazel has obviously been playing roulette and blown the table time. He says they gave the table away and they can't guarantee another one till next August. And she says, I'll be just as happy with a sandwich. Could you get me another tequila sunrise, please? And he says, all right, what's got into you is? And she goes, oh, I love this, Barry. The atmosphere, the click of the chips.
The click of the chips.
The click of the chips. The green beers. And then the croupier says, no more bets. And she goes, it's so romantic. See that man over there with a beard and the blue top. If he loses again, who knows? He might go out onto the balcony and blow his brains out. And she says, and he says, how much have you lost? And then he says, and the croupier says, 4 black, 4 negro. And she says, I'm about 150 up. And he goes, pesetas. And she goes, pounds. And he goes, pounds? Blimey, you've almost paid for your airfare. So if in 1986, a flight to Spain was £150, that would probably be the equivalent of around £500 now.
Yeah.
But yeah, airfares obviously weren't cheap before the.
I flew to Spain in the 80s, but I can't remember.
Well, I think if you would go on a package deal, it was obviously a lot cheaper. Hence the birth of the package holiday.
Yeah.
You know,
I actually used the airline that a couple of times that's featured.
Orion.
Yeah. Oh, I flew Orion a couple of times. Yeah.
I'm sure my mother probably did. I'm sure we may well have done. I can't remember, but yeah, it might have been when I was a kid. So anyway, we cut to the blackjack table,
my game.
And Bomber pulls a blackjack, and he's got a big smile. Anyway, Moxie comes over and he goes, hey, Bomb, how's it going? He says, I'm holding my own. He says, guess what? He says, what? He says, Wayne, he's chatting up Vicky. And Bomber's like, where? He says, down by the bar, trying to get a drink just now. And I copped some of the dialogue he was giving her. And he says, like what? And then Moxie does a Cockney, a fantastic impression of Wayne. He says, like, he goes, I suppose with Ally being such a workaholic, a girl like you gets neglected in certain areas. And Bomber says, that's subtle, was it? He says, yes. He says, it's not in our interests to have Wayne pestering Ally's lady. And Bomber stands up and he goes, Bomber, better deal with it. Take my hand over and be steady. And Moxie says, you can't talk to him, you know. And he says, I won't try. So Bomber walks towards the bar and he sees Wayne and Vicky. And obviously, as we know, this was actually, well, what we find out from Lesley in the interview is this was in a bar in Nottingham. And so obviously, unfortunately, by then Gary had passed away. So this is a stand-in. And so Bomber sees Oz and he says, look at the dirty dog. And Oz says, hey, he says, he never gives it a rest, man, does he? He's like one of them little wire-haired terriers, what keeps humping away at your leg. And he goes, I'll cure him. And so Bomber goes over and he goes, off limits, boyo. And Bomber picks him up and shoulder presses him above his head. And then obviously this is and this is a line which is obviously recycled.
You can tell it's been inserted, can't you?
Yeah. Well, it's totally, it's totally out of context, isn't it? Yeah. And it's a recycled line. I think it can be recycled from the first series. And he says, hold on, what am I supposed to do then, eh? Anyway, so Barry approaches, we cut back to the blackjack table and Barry's approaching Moxie. And Barry says, I don't know what's come over her. And he says, who? And he says, Hazel. I've never seen her like this before. She's getting really carried away. And Moxie's all chilled out again. She's on her holidays, Barry. And he says, I've been on holiday with her before, Moxie, and this isn't unwinding. This is reckless abandonment. She just put the down payment on a 3-piece suite on Red 11. And Moxie quite rightly points out, he says, well, you're not married yet, are you? It's her money, you know, not your settee. And then he says, he draws another card for blackjack. And he says, do you want to sit down? And Barry's like scared. He's like, no, thank you very much. So anyway, again, we see the little glimmer here of the little sparks of a future relationship.
Yeah.
And Oz approaches the bar and says, San Miguel, please. And then, you know, clearly he's got an agenda and he plays it cool. And he says, hiya. And Vicky says, you lads trying to save us from myself, is it? And he goes, eh? And he goes, oh, wait. And he goes, no. He says, well, just now what he's like, man. You know, he can get a bit carried away at times. And Vicky says, he's not so bad. He just saw that I was a bit down in the dumps, that's all. He was offering a bit of friendship and conversation. And then there's a little pause and then she very, very bluntly says, just his way of trying to get me pants off. And Oz is like, Oz is shocked that she would speak in such a fashion. Anyway, so we cut back to the villa. And Dennis has been on the phone to Ally. He puts the phone down and he says, that was Ally. And Christine says, I gathered that. Says, he wants me to go back to the UK. And she goes, what? And walk off the job. He says, no, just for a couple of days. Wants me to fly back with Hallwood, bring back some documents for signature. I'm sorry, you're going to be all right. And she goes, yeah, of course I will be. And he says, it's too important for the post, he said. And she goes, look, I don't like the gossip, but Vicky told me something today what I think you should know. And Dennis is distracted. He says, is this the T-shirt you got off Vicky? She goes, yes, what do you think? He goes, I think you should take it off. And he throws her down on the bed. He's definitely got another agenda as on Dennis. And she goes, Dennis, this is important. And he goes, what? And she goes, Ally Fraser. I think he might be in some sort of trouble. So we cut to the hotel and Brenda enters the bar at the hotel to see Hazel. And she waves her over and she goes, over here, Brenda. She goes, hello, Hazel. You want a coffee? She goes, I wouldn't mind. 2 more, please, Carlo. And Brenda says, wait for me. And Hazel, again, in pidgin Spanish, says, uno con leco. So I don't know what leco means, but leche is milk. So I don't know what leco means. Should have looked that up, really. It might mean something completely different. She goes, uno con leco, por favor. And then he actually goes, si, senor. He doesn't say senora, senorita. He goes, si, senor. So that may well be a mistake there. But anyway, she goes, it's me 3rd. I need jump leads to get going this morning. I wasn't in bed till 5. And Brenda's shocked. She goes, 5? How on earth is Barry going to get through work? And she says, well, he bowed out at 10 to 12. He's got this thing about being in bed before midnight. So do I. Well, in fact, I need to be in bed before 11. And says, always has had. I think he's afraid he's going to turn into a pumpkin. Brenda says, where were you? She goes, at the casino. And then she uses Barry's words. She goes, it was busting. I was like a woman possessed. And Brenda's like, gambling? And she goes, roulette. I was on a winning streak and I had to go with the flow, didn't I? And I felt terrible when I woke up this morning. And Brenda obviously assumes that she lost and she goes, I bet you did. But Hazel then says, and then I saw the £500 in my handbag and I felt ever so much better. And Brenda's like, £500? And she's like, yes. So lunch is on me. So we then cut to the aeroplane.
Orion.
The lovely Orion airline, as has been mentioned.
Yeah.
And Dennis comes forward from economy into business class to see Hallwood. And Hallwood is clearly an absolute scumbag.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he's Ally Fraser's lawyer. And as I think we said before, you know, he's not a criminal lawyer. He's a criminal lawyer. He is a dirty, low-down, backstabbing scumbag, would sell his own granny, like just slimy. And And Dennis says, aye, aye. And he says, hello, Dennis. He goes, I've just wandered up from economy, see how the other half live. And he sits down. And Hallwood says, I'm surprised Ally didn't get you a club ticket, Dennis. And he goes, I'm not. And Hallwood tries to make conversation. He says, Ally says your lads are doing a great job on the Villa. And he says, top rank my team. He says, no question. So Dennis probes for information. He says, so what's all the panic about then? And Hallwood realizes what's happened and he gets on the defensive. He's like, panic? Nobody's panicking, Dennis. And he says, he flies me all the way back to Newcastle, leaves the lads unsupervised. And he goes, well, it's papers, Dennis, urgent signatures, And he goes, could they not have waited until he got back? And he goes, well, he doesn't want to break into his holiday, does he? I mean, he's entitled to it after all, And then he changes the subject. He spins it. He goes, how are you enjoying Spain, Dennis? And he goes, it's an education, like. So we cut back to the port. And this is the frontline port of Benus where you and I have spent many years. And Barry and Hazel, Brenda and Hazel are walking along the front. And they're doing the typical tourist things. And Hazel says, look, a Rolls Royce. And then she sees the boat and she says, let's have a photo, Brenda. And then she sits near the boat, but then she goes, wait a minute. And she actually climbs on the boat. And then obviously he's given instructions about the camera. No, you don't have to focus. It's automatic. And Brenda says, which one do you press? And she goes, the grey button. And then she says, make sure you get lots of the boat in. And she says, all right. And then they're going to swap over. And Hazel says, I'll take one of you now. And then the man who we discover is Prince Stefano. Yeah. Prince Stefano comes out and he's very, very smooth. And he says, hi, perhaps you would like I take a photograph of you both. And Hazel says, I'm sorry if I was leaning on your boat. He says, of course not. Please come aboard. Come aboard. We take the photo here. And Hazel doesn't need asking twice. She says, come on, Brenda. And he says, I am Stefano. He says, Hazel Redfern, this is my friend, Brenda Hope. And he says, come stai. And Brenda, all of a sudden, speaks Italian. And she says, well, thank you. Well, very well, thank you. And then Prince Stefano says, you want, I take you against the rail. And Hazel, seizing the opportunity for this double entendre, says, any time he likes to Brenda. And she says, you don't have to focus, it's automatic. He goes, good, I know this camera. Yes, now, smile, good. And then Prince Stefano's companion, Gunther, comes out and speaks German. And he basically says, have we got some guests? And he says, meet my friends, Brenda and Hazel. Yeah, Hazel. And Gunther says, enchanté, Gunther. And Prince Stefano clicks and he says, Aldo. And the waiter appears, says, perhaps you like some champagne. And Brenda's on the defensive. She's like, no, thank you. But at the same time, Hazel, yes, please. And Prince Stefano says, oh dear, perhaps you like something else. And Brenda says, I just think it's a little early in the day for me. And he goes, and Prince Stefano says, early? And he grabs Hazel's watch. He goes, yes, you see, in Hong Kong, they are already having dinner. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere, isn't it, George?
Oh, yes.
And so Hazel encourages, and she says, come on, Brenda, we're in no mad rush. And she goes, well, yes, it will be nice. So good. First, we put out to sea, then we meet some friends, and then we have lunch, and then we catch the, and he says something in Italian. He goes, sea bass, Aldo, very good cook. And he kisses his fingers and he says, tasty dishes. And Gunther says, you join us. And again, Hazel needs no encouragement. No. We'd love to. And Brenda's like, we can't. And Hazel says, why? Wouldn't you rather go on a beautiful boat and walk around the streets like typical English tourists? And Brenda says, well, ask him what time we'll be back. Like she's sitting next to him. She's like, ask him. And he says, excuse me, am I right in thinking, are you English? I mean, like, you should be a detective there, Prince Stefano. And Hazel says, si. And he goes, you speak Italian. Good, I promise you, we will have you back in time for tea. Tea for 2. Tea for 4. So Prince Stefano is working his magic on the girls.
Yeah, he's a good actor, that guy. He was in Blake 7, one of my favourite sci-fi shows from the 70s.
Absolutely. So Prince Stefano, played by Stephen Grief, and 132 credits on IMDb.
Yeah, he's been around.
And is still working to this day. So his career started in 1967. He was in No Sex Please, We're British, which was obviously the play on words for No Sex Please, We're Brickies. Dixon of Dock Green, Blake 7, as you mentioned.
Remember Dixon of Dock Green well.
Yeah, Citizen Smith, Only When I Laugh, Minder, The Professionals, Dempsey and Makepeace, episode of Boone, which is, The Rite of Passage, EastEnders, Holby City, Doctor Who, Spooks, Coronation Street, The Crown. Like I say, 132 credits. And I think, again, one of those actors that if there is a token Italian needed for a program, he is the man that they...
As opposed to a croupier.
Yeah, exactly, as opposed to a token croupier. So, we cut and see that Ally Fraser and Kenny Ames are having a bit of a chat. And Ally's obviously nervous, and Kenny says, and Ally's having a strong drink, he says, triple brandies, you must be bloody nervous, son. And Ally Fraser says, I sense the solids are about to hit the air conditioning, Kenny. Broad Squad, Revenue, Her Majesty's Customs and Excise. And he says, they could be trying to brace me. He says, but maybe better if I go over and tough it out. And Kenny says, but, and he says, just a few too many ponderables, Kenny. Probably better if I just stick around here for a wee while and see which way the wind blows. And he says, yeah, well, if you want to buy some time down here, son, you're going to have to get some readies. And if the law are already onto you, they'll have your bank manager in tow and you won't be able to transfer any cash down here. And Ally says, I've been around the block, son. He says, yeah, but the sort of person you want to deal with round here won't take your Barclay card. And he says, I'm having cash flown in. And Kenny makes a joke. He says, what, by carrier pigeon? Ha ha. He goes, he won't half get bleeding tired flying across those Pyrenees. And he says, Dennis is bringing it. He says, who, your gaffer? He goes, you must trust him. And then Ally Fraser on the sly, as we all know, he says he doesn't. Yeah. No. So we cut back to the lads at work on the site in the villa. And
actually, I thought Barry was sitting on the toilet in the first sort of snap of this, but I think he's just sitting by the pool, isn't he?
Yeah, he's got a brolly in that to keep the sun off him. So anyway, Neville, he's talking. He says, "I envy Denby at this moment. You'd be sitting in an English pub, murdering an English pint." And Moxie quite rightly points out. He says, "You're a strange bloke, you are, Nev. Ever since I've known you, you've always wanted to be someplace else." He goes, "There's people down here paid a fortune to enjoy this hot Spanish sunshine." And Mama says, "Yeah, well, he'd rather be drinking warm ale in some manky pub in Gateshead." And Moxie said, "Yeah, but if he was there, he'd wish he was here." And Wayne is obviously still upset about the previous night. He goes, "I reckon that bomber's on Ali's payroll, acting like my naffing chaperone. I was on with that Vicky last night, I'm sure I was." And Oz says, "Look, obviously the lass has problems, Reed. Obviously she's vulnerable at this point in time, even to your transparent overtures. But it's not going to do us much good, is it? And it's not going to do the lass much good if you leap on her bones." And he says, "Oh, I see. So you've joined the moral majority, have you?" And Oz, again, quite right, he says, "What is it with you, eh? I mean, your nuts are not going to go on rusty doing here, are they? I mean, you've got Spanish boilers, French tarts, German tarts, Swedish tarts, Danish tarts, British tarts. Because, I mean, from Malaga to Gibraltar, it's wall-to-wall toddy. So why, Vicky, eh?" He goes, "Is it the danger?" He goes, "Does the thought of getting your knees shattered give you a great big bonk on or something?" What a fantastic line. And so Neville gets up and he says, "Right, lads, shouldn't we be getting back to work?" And Muck says, "What's all this? Are you deputy gaffer or what?" And Neville says, "No, it's just if we're starting a bit early, we can finish a bit early and get a few jars in." And Moxie says, "Oh, right," and he likes the sound of that idea. And so they all stand up, and Barry says, "Oh, by the way, the drinks are on Hayes tonight. She asked me to ask you to join us for cocktails at the Hollywood bar in the port." And Moxie says, "Ah, well done, Barry. You cracked it then. What a strike, kid." And he says, "What are you talking about?" And obviously Moxie assumes that this is the announcement of the engagement. And he says, "Barry and Hazel invite us for cocktails. If you know any just cause or just impediment, ye are here to declare it." And he makes a joke. He says, "Get off, Moxie." And he says, Wayne says, "Don't be coy, son. An announcement is obviously imminent." And Neville says, "Yeah, good lad, Barry. Have you got a date yet?" And he says, "Look, I'm not getting engaged, right? It's just that Hazel won some money in the casino last night and she wants us to celebrate." And Oz says, "How much?" And he goes, £500 or thereabouts. And Bomber is very impressed with this. And he says, "Below me, she's an heiress. I'd shut the gate on that one if I were you." So, I'm sure this is one of your favourite scenes, George.
So, in the hotel room.
Yeah, so Brenda and Hazel are in the hotel room, and the delectable Brenda
in a very small white bra
is in nothing but a bra. I'm sure that was one of your favourites. And Hazel is making an impression of Prince Devon. She goes, "You English girls, I love so much the touch of your skin." And Brenda's like, "Get off, man." And she goes, "You come into my engine room and I show you my pea
stone."
And she goes, "And I said to him, I said, Stefano, we may be 3 miles out, but that doesn't give you territorial rights." And Brenda says, "Look, how are you, man? I'm getting dressed. The lads will be back any minute now." And she goes, "Mind you, that Gunter was very attractive, wasn't he? He said he was an actor." And Brenda says, "Well, he must be a German actor because I've never seen him." She goes, "Well, you wouldn't get anyone that tasty on Emmerdale Farm, would you? And she goes, "Can I borrow your eyeliner?" And she goes, "Yeah, thank you." She goes, "Listen," and Brenda says, and again, Brenda's stood up, bangers out, basically. And she says, "Listen, I don't think I ought to tell Neville about what went on today, all right?" And she goes, "I know exactly what Barry would say if I told him I'd been drinking champagne on millionaire Playboy yachts." She goes, "What?" And she did a Barry impression. She goes, "You live in a fantasy world, you do, Hayes." So they have a little bit of a laugh at Barry's expense there. So we cut back to where in Newcastle, back in Newcastle, inside Hallwood, the scumbag's office. So Hallwood, the scumbag, says everywhere there's a red cross is where he's got to sign. "Okay, Dennis," and he goes, "Right," and he says, "The other stuff here is just for information." And Dennis says, "Right." He says, "Okay, Ty." He says, "Right, I better shift myself. I've got to get to the airport." And just as he's walking out, the worst bit worst bit of acting. Yeah, he does a Columbo on him. He's like, "Oh, Dennis, I nearly forgot. Will you take that back for Ally, will you?" And it's a big suitcase by the door. And he says, "What is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's just some spare clothes he needs now. He's staying down there a bit longer." And Dennis doesn't question it straight ahead. He just says, "Right, okay, draw then." And as he's walking out, he goes, "Cheers, Dennis." And I've written down here, I've just written "smarmy cunt."
He's smiling, smarmy smile, yeah.
And smug. He's got a smug, like he thinks he's so clever. And he thinks that he thinks he's just pulled the wool over Dennis's eyes. But little does he know. So we cut back to Spain, and this is everyone's in the Hollywood bar at the port. And they're all round the table having a drink. And Bomber says, "Here's to Hazel." And Oz says, "Oh, aye, cheers, Pet, thank you very much."
Is a Hollywood bar, is it a real bar, or do you think? I can't remember.
To be honest, I can't remember. I think if it is, it might have changed its name.
Yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah.
Or I don't know. Or was was that what might have been Sinatra's at a later date? I genuinely.
Yeah, that was further down, wasn't it? I mean, I'm not sure.
I can't remember.
Maybe we probably wandered in there at some point.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. It's on the front at the port.
Yeah.
So I think it might be what might be the post office bar now. I don't know. But so Barry putting the dampeners on, he says, you'll never be that lucky again, so make the most of it. And he says, we were quite lucky today. And Hazel says, we were quite lucky today, though, weren't we, Brenda? And Neville, he goes, why? What did you do, like? And she goes, nothing, we just enjoyed ourselves. And Barry says, well, we're not going gambling again tonight. We'll have a nice meal, a quiet one, okay? Would you like to? And then he says to Brenda and Neville, would you like to join us? And Brenda says, no, we've got to get back. Christina's had the bairn all day. And Oz says, well, if I was you, Hazel, I'd get myself back to the casino tonight and ride your luck. And Barry's like, don't encourage her anymore, Oz, please. He goes, well, it's all relative, isn't it? He says, I mind 500 nicker. Sounds like a lot of dough, but stick it all on one number and it comes up, talking about a tidy sum there, son. And Hazel is like, he's piqued her interest. And he says, how much would it be? And he says, 500, 35, 17 off, 18 grand with your steak. And Barry's like, don't even think about it. And Moxie says, yeah, but that's relative, and though, isn't it? I mean, 18 grand down here probably only buy you half a mast, pointing at a boat. And Oz says, well, fair enough, leave it on, let it ride. And if it comes up, you're talking about Vaughan, $750,000. And Wayne's like, oh, now, hold on, that is significant. That could change your life, change your whole life. That could, Hazel, but would you be happy? And she's like, definitely. Mama says, I've got nothing against money per se. I just think I like my money to be earned by hard graft. Sorry, that's Barry. And Bomber says, me too. 2 hours toil on a Tuesday on the pools, get 8 score draws come up. Talking about the old football pools. And Barry says, how did all these people get all this money? And Oz is like, not by honest graft. I can guarantee you that. Half of them bastards out there are probably either embezzlers, arms dealers, or bloody drug smugglers. And Barry says, you don't know that, Oz? And he says, nah. He goes, I bet me bollocks on it. He says, now look at them two there, Ponson doing the quayside, right? He goes, they've just got off a boat the size of a cross-channel ferry. Didn't they think that from 30, I didn't think they got that from 30 years of clagging vinyl roofing on cars, do you? And as it turns out, it is Prince Stefano and Gunter. And Prince Stefano comes over and he's like, Brenda, Hazel, come sta? And Gunter drops her right and he says, you left your sunglasses this afternoon. And Brenda's like, Neville, Bomber, Wayne, Moxie, Harry, I don't believe you know Gunter and Prince Stefano. And Prince Stefano's like, ciao. So we cut back to Newcastle Airport and Dennis is at the check-in.
Orion.
Again, Orion Airlines. And the check-in lady says, have you got your tickets? And then a customs officer appears and says, Mr. Patterson. So the customs officer is played by a guy called Gary Caitlin, who's got 10 credits on IMDb, but including Spender and Crocodile Shoes. So he's probably a mate of Jimmy Nails somewhere along the line. So, and he says, Mr. Patterson, he says, I wonder if you'd like to come with me, please, sir. He goes, who are you? He goes, customs. He goes, customs? He goes, I'm on my way out, man. He goes, this way, please. So we then cut to the other end and we're at Malaga and Ally is waiting.
A very pissed off Ally. Yeah.
Yes, and he's not happy at all, is he? So he calls the guy over and he says, Senor, he goes, is that everybody off the flight from Newcastle? And he goes, And he goes, and he speaks Spanish. He goes, la salida, todos los pasajeros de Newcastle. Something along those lines. My Spanish isn't that good. And he goes, sí, senor. And Ally, as you've said, George, is not a happy camper. So Neville and Brenda are in the bedroom. We're cut to the villa. And Neville is rubbing lotion into Brenda. And he goes, hi, you really did get burned on that boat, didn't you? And she goes,
he doesn't seem that pissed off, really, does he, Neville?
I mean, he obviously trusts Brenda. And I mean, not as pissed off as Barry is when we find out.
Yeah.
And she goes, I know you don't notice it when you're at sea with the breeze. And then he says, Anna, he goes, I was the same that week. He goes, I was the same. He goes, that week I spent on, and he says, Khashoggi's yacht. I don't know who that's supposed to be. No, thought you might know, George. No. Anyway, and she goes, you know, I didn't want to go, Neville. It was Hazel's idea. And he says, you'd have been mad not to, Pet. And she goes, well, anyway, at least we've got an excuse to go back. That's why I left me sunglasses there. Shall I take you next time, shall I? And he goes, oh, I can see them putting the welcome mat out for me unless they want the deck swabbed like. And she goes, I'm not sure I'd want you there. It was full of beautiful women, Swedish types. He goes, oh, aye, do you reckon he's really a prince? And she goes, aye, she says he is. She goes, there was a coat of arms in his wheelhouse. And he goes, well, there's a coat of arms above the bar and the fat ox. Doesn't mean Alf Tonks is in line for the throne.
The good old fat ox. Yeah.
And he gives her a slap on the shoulders and he says, there you go, Pet. And she goes, anyway, there's all sorts of counts and printers in Italy. And he says, oh, then she goes, yes, 2 a penny out there. It's not like having an English title, you know. And he goes, hey, well, listen, I hope Hazel's, he goes, I hope Hazel's photos come out because otherwise your mum will never believe it. She goes, hey, man, she's a funny girl, that Hazel. Talk about hidden depths. I'll tell you one thing, Barry's got his hands full. And with that, we cut to the hotel bar. And Barry is drunk.
He's had a few.
Belligerent, to say the least. He is not a happy camper. And so the waiter is bearing the brunt. And he says, are you finished? He goes, no, I'm not, as a matter of fact. I'd like another fundador and another cappuccino, por favor. And he goes to do the bidding. Oh, excuse me, Christ. And Hazel appears to be taking the piss. And she goes, it's way past your bedtime, Barry. And he says, well, there's still a lot of things need to be resolved, Hazel. And she goes, I've told you nothing happened. Prince Stefano was a perfect gentleman, which is what I'd expect from royal blood. And again, she's like rubbing it in and basically being a bit cunty about it, you know what I mean? And Barry says, you told me that he asked you to go to Sardinia for a fortnight. And again, you know, like she's even like talking like she's contemplating doing it. There would have been a lot of us going there, would have been a crowd of us. And Barry says, look, Hazel, if that's the sort of life you want, right, you better get after it. I'll tell you, sitting around the Mediterranean, sipping champagne and scuba diving is not real. You'd just be a bloody plaything to him. He'd dump you in Corsica with no ticket back. And you can see Barry's very, very upset. Yeah. He's like, I'm real and I've got feelings. And I tell you, they're very, very bruised. Because you made a laughing stock of me in front of me mates. They've watched me suffering while you pillixed me around, making your mind up.
Pillix, I love that.
Making your mind up what you want out of life. Well, I'm sick of your evasiveness and I'm sick of your procrastination. And the waiter says, will that be all, senor? He drops and Barry says, no. He decks his drink. He goes, I'd like another, por favor. And this is, you know, Hazel again. So in the last episode, when she thought Barry was a bank robber, like she was straight on the plane. Yeah. And it turns out he's not, and she started treating him like shit. And then all of a sudden, Barry's shouting and screaming at her, and she perks up and starts paying attention. She goes, why have you never been like this before, Barry? He goes, probably because I've never been so pillixed around before. She goes, you're so assertive and decisive. That's what I need in a man, because I'm one of nature's vacillators. And he goes, right, if it's decisiveness you want, we're going to get married, Hazel Redfern. And I don't mean a prolonged engagement with announcements in the Express and stuff. I mean here, next bloody week. And she goes, oh, all right. And then Barry shits himself. He goes, sorry. She goes, I accept. We'll get married. It'll be ever so romantic. And Barry tries backpedaling a bit. He goes, oh, well, it doesn't have to be here. And she goes, it's perfect. And he goes, what about your folks? What about me mother with her hip? And cousin Nora and Auntie Mabel and the twins? And she goes, sod the lot of them. oh, look, I don't want a conventional wedding like all our friends. I don't want an accordion player and prawn bolavants in the Bridge Street assembly rooms. Shouldn't we, and he says, shouldn't we review this in the morning? She goes, oh, no. She goes, don't back down now, Barry. She goes, not now. He goes, I'm not. And he's a bit shaky. He goes, no, I'm not. I'm just as long as you're serious. And she goes, absolutely. And they kiss, and she goes, first thing in the morning, I'll tell Prince Stefano that Sardinia is out the question. And Barry looks pretty worried. Now,
the radish. Yeah.
So, here we get a bit of a bomb drop. So we find out that we're in a bar that is out of town.
Yeah.
It's off the beaten track. And Bomber enters with a very
small, I must say.
I mean, yes, she obviously has a thing for the larger gentleman. And yeah, so Bomber enters with a very delectable young lady in tow.
Yeah.
And so he approaches the bar, and who does he see but young Vicky?
Vicky.
So he approaches and he goes, hello, Vicky. And obviously Vicky looks up and you can see the shock on her face. And he goes, and she's like, hello, Bomber. And he says, never been in this one before. And she goes, no, it's a bit more select. And he goes, can I get you a drink? And she goes, no, thanks, I've got one. And he looks down and there's a beer and a brandy on the bar. And he says, I see you're not alone. And she goes, and she's obviously she's been caught out. And she's like, no. And he goes, wouldn't be anyone I know, would it? And she goes, it is actually, yeah. And, trying to play it all down and giving it this.
Yeah.
And he goes, and Bomber says, well, look, because I know it's none of my business. And I mean, I'm not one for bad mouthing my mates, but where the ladies are concerned, that wains nothing but bad news. And she goes, well, I'll bear that in mind. And then as she says that, Oz comes out of the toilet
in his famous blue suit.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not. He hasn't got his blue suit on there. He's got his cardigan and his holy pants.
Oh, right. Oh, maybe that was an earlier
Or
scene.
He's definitely got his holy pants on because I wrote it down. She goes, anyway, so Oz comes out and he goes, evening. And then obviously the penny drops with Bomber and there's a big smile appears across Bomber's face. And he says to her, he goes, I thought you said nobody knew in this place. And she goes, I didn't think they did. And Bomber says, well, this really is a turn up for the books. And Oz is like, aye, well, let's keep the lid on it, shall we? And Bomber says, my lips are sealed. And then she says, have you got any warnings to give us about him? And Bomber says, Oz, he's a prince among men. But yeah, so if you see like the contrast, so Vicky is in her best frock, dripping with diamonds. Yeah. Super gorgeous and glamorous. And Oz has got his jeans on with the holes just on the arse cheeks and that. So he's made an effort. He hasn't got his brown leather jacket on that he works in. So that's as dolled up as Oz gets. Anyway, so we cut to the Marbella Club. And Ally Fraser's on the phone. As we sharp find out, he's on the phone to Malcolm Hallwood because Dennis hasn't turned up with his documents. And he's shouting down the phone. He's like, well, tell Baz to look for Dennis's mother's house. Check out his friends, his neighbours. And then Vicky comes out and says, can I take the car, Ally? And he goes, just take whatever you like. Just get lost, will you? And obviously this is another nail in the coffin of their relationship, the way that he speaks to her. You can see that she's very, very upset. And as she's walking out the hotel suite door, Dennis enters. And Hallwood, the scumbag, he's again slimy as fuck. He's like, Ally, Dennis is a family man. He has kids here. He's not going to do a runner with your money. Don't panic. So, I mean, this is a lawyer that's essentially condoning, the threatening of violence to children. You know what I mean? I mean, what a shithouse. And And he's like, don't tell me not to panic, pal. If Dennis is picked up at the airport, then it's my nuts that are in the ringer. And Dennis walks in. He says, good morning. He says, where in Jesus' name have you been? He goes, I got the first flight out this morning. He goes, oh, you did you? What, you had a night on the town? I've been down been at the airport for 2 hours while you're doing the strip clubs of Soho. And Dennis, quite aggressively, comes back. He goes, no. He goes, I was detained by 2 gentlemen of the customs. And this puts the shits up Ally Fraser. He says, you were? He goes, did they give you a good going over, Dennis? He goes, oh, aye, they certainly did, yeah. And he goes, well, what did they say? And then Dennis lets him off and he goes, well, eventually they said, we're very sorry you've been inconvenienced, Mr. Patterson. And Ally Fraser laughs. He goes, oh.
Sees the suitcase,
yeah. And then he makes a joke. He goes, we're very sorry you've been inconvenienced, Mr. Patterson. He goes, that's terrific. And so he takes the suitcase and he opens it. And there's nothing in there. And he shouts, don't fart me around, Dennis. And he goes, don't fart you around. He goes, you set me up to bring a bag of undeclared illegal currency out of the country. You put my chopper on the black, pal. And he says, did they find it? He goes, well, if they had, I wouldn't be here, would I? He goes, oh, I see. So you opened the case before you left home. He goes, it's a good job I did, isn't it? He goes, you must think I'm a right wanker. He goes, look, I knew I wasn't sent back to Newcastle to bring you some documents. He goes, something heavy's coming down on you, pal, and it couldn't happen to a nicer fella. And he goes, that slag Vicky's been shouting him out of. He goes, you just leave Vicky out of it. He goes, you brought this on yourself, man. He goes, where's my money, Dennis? He goes, oh. He goes, it's safe. He goes, less a few quid. I've taken to bump myself up to club class. And then and then he does his famous. And he's like, oh, Dennis. And then he tries to rationalize it. He says, you know, the reason I didn't level with you is because I reckon that with the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. I didn't want you going through customs with the old ticker pounding and the blood pressure shooting up through the roof. And he says, oh, it's nice to know you had my best interests at heart. And he's like, Dennis, the reason I sent you is a reflection of my trust. We've worked together for a long time, you and me. Scotch, do you? And pouring him a drink. And he says, look, I'm about to jack all this in, right? And that 25 grand, that's like my warranty. And he goes, are you laying down terms, Dennis? He goes, I am actually, yeah. He goes, first off, you hold the deed to my wife's house, and I'd be obliged if Hallwood sent them back to me bank, right? And he goes, secondly, as you're about to become an exile out here, I'm a bit concerned about the lads. I mean, your assets might get tied up for a bit. So that money is guaranteed their full whack, generous bonuses, and the airfares back home. And he says, anything else? He says, no. He says, oh, yeah. And he says, if I see Vicky with so much as a broken fingernail, you'll never see the balance.
Mm.
So,
back at the villa.
I mean, again, you know, Ally Fraser is a bit of a shit gangster, really, isn't it?
Yeah. No, he's not a hard man himself, is he? No.
Ah, well, exactly, you know. You'd think that most gangsters have got to where they are because they could have a row, you know, and Dennis is just, you know, like on several occasions, Dennis has fucking told Ally Fraser how it is. Yeah. And like nothing's actually happened to him. And the only time he did send his goons after them, they got the shit kicked out of them by everyone, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, he must be the fucking worst gangster ever. So, anyway, we're back on site and all the lads are at work and Dennis arrives back. And they all say, hello, Den. And he says, all right. And Neville says, how did it go? And he says, great, hey. He puts a bag down. He says, there's a bottle of scotch in there for you and a bottle of vodka for when you're through. Neville says, how did home look? And he says, magic, Nev. Working out here, you forget what a Tyneside sunset looks like. And Christine comes in. He says, hello, darling. Comes out and says, hello, darling. And then we go inside. And Dennis says, so how you been? All right? He says, and she says, yes, I've been fine. He says, look, I've got this for you for tipping us the wink about Ally. She goes, thanks. He goes, it's good to see you. And she goes, good to see you too. And they kiss. And he says, so I was right then. Ally Fraser is in some sort of trouble. And Dennis says, oh, he's in trouble, all right. You know what I think? Set the ball rolling. That house we did up for him in Derbyshire. You know, when we were working there, we used to say it was haunted. Well, I tell you one thing, it's going to come back and haunt Ally. He got too greedy, cut too many corners. Now it's all going to come down on him. And she goes, well, where does that leave us? She goes, all the rest of the lads. He goes, it's all right. I took out insurance. And she goes, what do you mean? And he says, I'll tell you after. I've got to get back to work. And she says, oh, yes, not yet, you haven't. So Christine has got designs on our Dennis there.
In his small pants.
In his budgie smugglers.
Yeah.
So he's obviously just had a bit of nookie, and he's having a sing in the shower. And Neville is coming down the speaking, and he says, I've never heard that before. And Brenda says, what? He says, Dennis singing in the shower. And he goes, I mind, he's never been so cheerful. I've noticed that. And he says, it's very worrying. And she goes, why, for heaven's sake? He's like, well, I'm just not used to it, that's all. And she goes, I think it's Chris. And he goes, women always think it's women that cheer men up. He says, nah, there's more to it than that. And she goes, what's your theory? He goes, I don't know. Maybe he's going home. Maybe he's got some work lined up. And she goes, well, say what you like. I think they're very well suited and she's a very nice girl. And he's like, I never said she wasn't. And obviously, you know, that's quite ironic, the fact they're talking about his real life. And anyway, Brenda says, well, you certainly got out of bed on the wrong side this morning, didn't you? He goes, I'm sorry, Pet. I suppose it's just the situation. Living this close proximity to another couple. And she goes, well, we haven't had to pay for a hotel, love. So I haven't had to pay for a hotel, have we? He goes, I know, but it's a bit restricting in other areas, though, isn't it? And she says, honestly, you're so old-fashioned in some ways, Neville. I mean, I know they're in the room next door, but you don't have to run both taps every time you make love. And then Dennis comes and he goes, oh, can you believe there's no hot water again? So insinuating that Neville's also just had a shag. And obviously, no hot water again. So it's obviously a repeat performance. So Neville and Brenda have obviously been going at it. And anyway, so we cut and we see Ally Fraser
and Kenny.
Well, Ally Fraser is smoking a cigarette. And I think this is the very first time we've ever seen him smoke a cigarette.
That's it, yeah.
So I think this is to insinuate that the stress is obviously getting to him. And Kenny says, look, I know it must go against the grain, but you've got to give your gaffer top marks for initiative. And he says, if I ever get back to the UK, I'll damage him for life.
He'll get someone else to damage him for life.
Yeah, well, Kenny makes a joke. He says, he says, well, he's pretty safe then by the sounds of things. He says, don't worry about the 25 grand. Think about it as a blessing in disguise. And he says, well, I find it hard to be that philosophical. He goes, now be fair. He goes, it lets you know that they're on your case. It's only a matter of time before they seize your books, freeze your assets and issue the warrants. And believe me, I speak as someone with experience in these matters. And he says, so what do I do now? He says, buy yourself some time. He says, son, Spain may not be the haven you thought it was. You may be better off in Costa Rica or the Mongolian People's Republic. And again, Kenny Ames is, very much having a laugh at Ally Fraser's expense here. And obviously they're supposed to be mates, but we see there's no honour among thieves here. And he says, don't come the comedian with me, Kenny. And he says, no, bear with me, son. He says, the Brits will already be in touch with their Spanish amigos. Believe me. And Ally says, he goes, I've got some money in Switzerland. And he goes, better. He goes, foresight, planning, the ability to think ahead. That's what separates you and me from the common herd, Ally. But he says, I'd have to go there myself. He goes, right, you get yourself down there. You go down to Tangiers. And I know this bloke with a boat. Don't worry, he's not a tan hand in a nightshirt with a flower pot on his head. He's from Felix. Flower pot. And he goes, how much? And he goes, 20%. And he goes, 20%? And he goes, that's only because you're a mate. And that's all in. For that, you get Bobby and his boat in Tangier, all the overheads, and the crew of the San Saucy. And Ally says, well, we'll worry about the numbers later. How do we get the ball rolling? He goes, well, I need a little bit in advance, And again, you know, Kenny Ames is basically, I think he's trying to take Ally Fraser for a ride here.
Yeah.
Tapping him up straight away for cash. And I think Kenny Ames has not forgotten the fact that Ally Fraser tried to take advantage of him with, with Thornley Manor.
Yeah.
And the other, you know, Ally Fraser was perfectly prepared to take advantage of all of the other crooks on the Costa del Sol. So that attitude has definitely come back to bite him in the arse. And he says, I've got some cash in a safe up in the villa. And he says, all right. He says, let's go and count it then, shall we? And as Ally looks off, like Kenny Ames looks at him like a predator. He's like, you know, Kenny Ames is definitely looking at him like he's a meal, you know what I mean, that he's going to take. And he goes, hang on, wait a minute. He goes, I'm on Bobby's boat. I've got my money in the suitcase. He goes, how do you propose to get me back on Spanish soil undetected? And Kenny says, we'll have to think about that one, won't we? So we cut back to the villa and the lads are at work and the girls come out with a big bottle of champagne with a Magnum.
Yeah.
And Christine says, right, lads, it won't harm you to down tools a bit early for once. And she says, come on, Den, open that. She gives him the Magnum. And he says, champion. And she says, Barry's got an announcement to make. And he says, has he? And the champagne cork pops and everyone goes, hey! And Barry says, uno memento, please. And Neville says, oh, hey, hang on. He says, I'm now able to put an end to all the speculation concerning Miss Hazel Redfern and myself. He goes, last night, I am happy to say that this fair maiden agreed to be my wife. And they all cheer, hey. And he goes, and what's more? And he goes, and Hazel says, wait, there's more. And Moxie says, she's in the club. And Barry says, the nuptials will take place next Wednesday. And needless to say, you are all cordially invited. And Oz turns to Moxie and says, aye, she must be. Anyway, so Ally and Kenny arrive. And obviously, Ally Fraser is none too happy with the scene of the party. And he says, what the heck is going on, Vicky? And she goes, Ally, Barry and Hazel are getting married down here next week. And Barry says, give Mr. Ames and Mr. Fraser a drink of champagne. And Ally's like, oh, you'll be wanting the day off, I suppose. And Dennis steps in. He goes, come on now, Ally. That's not too much to ask now, is it? And Kenny Ames says, come on, Ally. Where's your generosity of spirit? And Ally Fraser says, I've got other things on my mind, Kenny. And Hazel says, there you are, Mr. Fraser, and gives him a drink. And Barry says, this is my fiancée, Hazel Redfern. This is Mr. Fraser and Mr. Ames. And he says, pleased to meet you, love. All the best to you there, son. And then Kenny Ames has a
devious scheme in mind.
Yeah. And he says, Ally. He says, excuse us. And he pulls Ally to one side. He goes, Ally, look, if the happy couple wants to get married, they can use my yacht. And Ally's like, what? And he goes, and then we can have the wedding just outside of the 5-mile limit. And the penny drops and Ally Fraser realizes what Kenny's about. And they both have a big smile on their face. And Dennis says a toast to Barry and Hazel. And everyone goes, Barry and Hazel. And Ally Fraser and Kenny Ames chink
big smile.
with a big smile. So the plan has been laid for how Ally is going to get his ill-gotten gains back into Spain. So the credits roll. That's the end of the episode. What a fantastic episode it is. Full of, good stuff there. We've seen Barry lose his temper and get all emotional. We've seen Oz and Vicky are getting very, very close. Ally Fraser is losing the plot a bit, and Dennis has stuck it right on him and laid the plans to get out from under Ally's thumb. So for the first time ever, in the credits, Kenny Ames, James Booth gets a sole credit. So this it was probably written in the contract that at some point they would get it. But yes, so Kenny Ames gets a sole credit. The next credit is Ally Fraser and Vicky. Then it's Hazel, Brenda and Christine. Then it's Hallwood the scumbag, Stefano and Gunter, and then the customs officer, the Spanish croupier, the token croupier, and Carlos, the barman. And that is the end of this episode. And what a fantastic one it was. We are all teed up. So, George, can you believe it? Next week, is the season 2 finale.
Yeah, I think I'll buy a lottery ticket next week. I think for.
Well, maybe try and use the same numbers.
Yeah.
So if any of our viewers or listeners have anything to comment on about this episode or anything else, then please do feel free to email us on Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. Follow our social medias, Instagram @Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, Twitter @Auf Again. Like and share the Facebook page, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, and click that bell. And as always, if you prefer to listen instead of watch, we're on all good podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcast Breaker, and many, many more. And new episodes are released every Friday at 10 a.m. And our theme music is composed and performed by the guitar man, Mr. Lee Dosky. So please, please, please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your Auf Wiedersehen Pet loving friends about us. Our sponsor, as we know, Top Gun Tattoo, 12 The Harris Arcade in Reading, topguntattoo.co.uk, 01189 968 667, and you get a 20% discount with Zach by quoting the code Hathaway and Scheitman. And remember, a free Neville and Lottie tattoo for every single watcher and listener. And remember, the fantastic giveaway prize at the moment is this great, genuine signed picture copy of the Magnificent Seven in Dusseldorf. So if you want to win the picture, go to the social medias, follow, like, tag, and share. And you too could be in with a chance of winning this fantastic prize. So, once again, big thanks to the fantastic and beautiful guest, Lesley Saint-John.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And next week, the big finale of season 2. So until next week, George.
Adios. Auf Wiedersehen.
And Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Oh, yeah, man. All out of options, nothing to choose.